Hello everybody, welcome into our latest live broadcast. Today it is the 12th of December 2024. 12 plus 12 is 24, isn't it? The 12th month, the 12th day, 24th year. Ooh, look at me go with my math. I'm such a show-off. Welcome in everybody. Today's live show is going to continue on where we left yesterday with regards to this over-the-top build here. A couple generations behind with the Z690 chipset, but a 14900K processor, which is still a very current CPU. And we do have our case and we do have a power supply to use, so we can finish this up. We never did get around to testing the RAM or doing any benchmarks, so I thought we can do that either before we put it in the case or after. I figure we ought to just put it in the case first and see what it's going to look like when it's all completed. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Hello to Planet Kraus with a $2 super chat who says, just do it. Oh, that's awfully bossy. Let's see. Mark Gaines saying hello. There's Michael Sayers and Bill Knott and Jonathan. Joining us here in the chat room, along with James Kerwin Trains and John Paul Bacon, Andy Kane, Charles Eslick, and Raj D. all say hello. And Craig Dowler as well, popping in there. Welcome in, guys. And yeah, we're going to... many things got pushed behind schedule due to waiting on parts or unexpected reactions to the building process. This one, smooth as butter. In all fairness, this is the second one of these boards we've done. And as you can tell, when we do something similar to what we've done before, it usually goes a lot smoother. And that's where experience comes in. Like I say, you can read, you can watch videos, or you can do. And it's really, well, it's interesting to read and watch. It is far more beneficial, at least for me anyway, to actually do it and get myself, you know, elbows deep inside of a computer or whatever it is I'm working on to really understand it to a much better level, much more in-depth level. So that's what we share with you here on these videos, is that you're here doing this with me and we go through that learning curve together and we see that improvement together when we revisit similar builds where maybe it's an ASRock board I've used before and it will always go together faster the second time and even faster the third time. Same with familiar cases or familiar, even the familiar chipsets. In this case, we've used the MEG Z690 once before, and I didn't even bother going into the accessories of the box because it has antennas, it's got a little USB flash drive with drivers on it. It comes with a lot of stuff that a regular, ordinary, everyday motherboard does not. And rather than go through all of that again, we don't need to because we already know what's in there. And for our purposes, we don't need any of that. However, you know, someone down the line might, so we always hold on to those parts. I've more or less left it as it was at the end of yesterday's show, just putting away some empty boxes that were crowding the area here. Now, the only reason I even bought that board is it was on sale. And the only reason we're putting it into this giant case is because it was half price. It was on sale at Woot. I wasn't even sure what I was going to use it for, but I knew it'd come up into something. And it didn't take long for me to realize these two things go together. So maybe subconsciously in my mind I knew that. But, you know, when I ordered it. But in the meantime, I am hoping the rest of this all goes pretty smoothly. The difficulty I'll have is just having the liquid cooler attached already. May make the installation in the case a little bit more challenging, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. John Struther says hello. There's our friend Buster. Peter Lycock joins us. Colin Hilton saying hello. And Caleb Reynolds, as well as Charlie Purdy, join us in the chat room. Welcome in, guys. Always good to see everybody. Charlie Purdy with a $10 super chat says hello, Carey, Mara, and everyone. And Planet Cryos with a $2 super chat says, just do it, please. There you go. The magic word. That's funny. Peter Laycock, our friend Buster, kicked us off with a 10-pound super chat. He says, good evening, Carey and Mara and everyone in the chat. All the best from Bonnie, Scotland, where the temperature in Edinburgh is 34 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.1 degrees Celsius. I've got to tell you, we just watched the guy there in the UK. He's got a YouTube channel called Rate My Takeaway, and he goes around to different restaurants and tries the food and then reviews it. He's in Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales. He just gets in his van and he drives. And recently he did a review of a little tiny shop in Paisley, Scotland, just outside of out of Glasgow, and it was called Roasters. What? Did you say something?
I said glass cow.
Glass cow? Anyway, it's a fun channel, and the food that they were serving out of this little, almost like a hole in the wall, where people had to wait outside and take turns going in to order. And I mean, they served him on proper cookware, like breakable. If it hits the floor, it's going to break. Here in the States, a place like that would give you paper plates and plastic fork and knife. And the food, wow, the food looked like it was, 5-star food. So when we come out there, Buster, you're going to have to show us around, and maybe we'll have to try this place out. It looks really good. He tried a few places out there in Scotland, but that one was his, I think, most recent, or one of his most recent visits. So I'm getting to learn a little bit more about Scotland and their culture. The people, it just seems so nice there. The person that was helping him was extremely courteous, and that just makes us want to take a trip out there even more, but maybe when the weather warms up a little bit. But anyway, thank you so much, Buster, for your super chat and the weather update. Yeah, that guy's YouTube channel is called Rate My Takeaway. It's all one word. And if you're interested in seeing how people, well, first of all, if you're in another country, you've never been to the UK, to see their culture and listening to the British accent talk to the Scottish accent, that was quite amusing for me, to listen to both of them chat with each other. I wonder if they had a hard time understanding each other as much as I did, because their accents are very different. And then if you're also living there and you're looking for somewhere different that might appeal to you, that you maybe never heard of before, it's a great YouTube channel to check out for that reason as well, which I imagine is why most people watch him. They're probably local and they're curious about finding new places and what this guy thinks of them. All right, I guess we can jump right into it. Paul Connolly joins us from, come on, Carey, is he from Australia? I can't remember. I'm sure he'll correct me. He's in Australia. All right, pat on the back, Carey, good job. All right, Joseph Hawkins is in New Zealand, the other Australia. Didn't mean to be insulting. It's just funny to me as an American because they're both down under. All right, with that, let's get to going. I've got Memtest 86. I got my flash drive, bootable Memtest 86 flash drive right here, ready to test this RAM. I am relatively, like 98% certain we have bad RAM here. It is possible that it just doesn't work on the 800 series chipset. It doesn't make any sense, but it's possible. So I thought, just before we send it back to Amazon, we could try it in this board, but I really do want RGB memory on this board. I don't know what's going on at Amazon, but all their memory, like for 32 gigs, they want over $100 for even the cheapest. Should be around $83, maybe a little less. Come to find out, all that appears to be left at Amazon, for whatever reason, is all the higher speed memory, like 6,000 mega transfers per second or higher. I don't need 6,000. I mean, 5,200 may be a little low, but it should work. 5,600 is fine. 6,000 is fine, but I don't want to go higher than that. And so a lot of the memory I'm seeing at Amazon, and let me correct myself here, is higher than 6,000. And that's why the price is so much more. So paying $110 for 32 gigs of RAM, when I can get 32 gigs of OLOy RGB RAM at Newegg for $83, why am I paying for the higher speed RAM when I'm not overclocking it, I'm not using it? So just an FYI out there, sometimes it's cheaper during certain times of the year to go somewhere else, right? Amazon's not always the cheapest, and Amazon doesn't show you what's not in stock. So it's not like Amazon comes up and says, hey, here's that $83 RAM, but we're out of stock on it. They just don't even show it to you. They show you the closest thing they have available, which right now is all the higher speed RAM, which costs more money. And the higher the speed it goes, the cost differential gets exponentially larger. So, you know, if you're looking at 6,000 speed RAM compared to 5,600 speed, it may go up by $30. But then if you go from 6,000 speed on up, it may jump by $50 or $80 to where 32 gigs of RAM can cost as much as 64 gigs of RAM. That's slower, even though in your system, unless you overclock it, they all run the same speed. Just be aware of this and choose accordingly. As a result, this is my last kit of DDR5, 32 gig, and that's probably the most common I use with RGB. It's pretty rare we don't use it these days. So I went ahead and ordered a couple more kits of that and almost sent it to Studio B. I haven't ordered from Newegg in a long time, and I thought, you know, I better check where that's going. And sure enough, it was going to go back to Studio B. So updating all those addresses is still catching me months later. But anyway, just a little FYI, I think there's going to be some great deals after the holidays if you can wait. I think there's going to see, you know, especially on Amazon returns coming from Amazon Warehouse. I am so tempted to just get another 14900K for the other, we have an MSI Z690, what's it called? Unify, but we don't have a chip for it yet. The good news is we'll be able to find these 14,000 series chips 3 years from now, but the motherboards, forget about it. So the idea is that it's good to have the board. We can always get the chip easy later. A lot of people are still buying the 14 high-end chips, the 14th gen, because they're cheaper than the Ultra series of chips and don't appear to do anything less. In some cases, they do more. So even though both are relatively expensive, right? A 14900K is $433. That's the cheapest price I've seen. No cooler is included in that. By comparison, if you wanted an Ultra 9, you're at around $600. You'd have to go to an Ultra 7 or an Ultra 5 to get closer to this price here. And then you're getting less for your money. And it's very difficult to find them in stock. So it makes sense that these 13th and 14th gen chips are still selling pretty much like they have been since they came out. They've not slowed down. 12th generation and prior, those have slowed down quite a bit, and you can tell by the pricing. If I'm going to put a board together like this, I really want to put the best available so it will last as long as possible. There is nothing better we can put in this, maybe a KS, but that gets more challenging to cool, and the difference is minuscule, and the price differential, once again, is it loses all value for the dollar. So for me, that's more of a novelty or an absolute industry need than it is a practical solution for a typical end user, or even a typical business. I mean, this is pretty high end. Anything above this it's just a little bit above it, but the price difference is a lot. So that's the logic I'm using, and I'm so tempted to just get the 14900K, but I know I won't get to building that for a few weeks. And before you know it, we're into 2025. Those returns will start coming in. And if I just wait, I know I can get a returned one, or that the price will just naturally come down as the shopping season ends. So keeping my eye on it. And I typically watch Amazon, Newegg, and B&H Photo. Those are my three main go-tos. And then every once in a while, I get an alert from Woot, W-O-O-T. They typically work with Amazon, and I would use Amazon to pay for the order. And it'll typically ship from Amazon, but Amazon doesn't offer it at the Woot price for a limited number, and that's how we got today's case. See how I brought that around? Now, I suppose what we should probably do is go ahead and put this in the case first. I think that'll make my life a lot easier instead of trying to balance everything out on the table here. Normally, and as I told you yesterday, I wouldn't even build this out on a table. This would be built in the case under normal circumstances. But that's not very educational for a video because you can't see anything. So please don't do it this way. All right, let me just get everything unplugged, and then I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get this moved over so I can get the case up here on the bench. Clearly, I don't have room for both, so we're going to figure this out right now. And the first thing I can do is get rid of this power supply because it's definitely going to be in our way, and we're not using this power supply in this build. We're going to use a returned ASUS Tough 1000 watt gold rated modular power supply for this build. They were about $155 brand new and about $30 off returned. I got a feeling these returned ones are going to be just fine. We'll go ahead and take out our plugs here. I'll get all of them out because sometimes these can get in the way of the install. And so whether they do or they don't, we'll just remove them, and then I know for a fact they won't, regardless. All right, let me get these wire ties out of here. Just put those down there. Now I need to find a place to put this board where it isn't going to fall over, and that's probably, well, as long as I keep it on the cardboard box. If I put it on the floor, then the worst thing I can do is step on it, but at least I don't have to worry about it falling over from the weight of the cooler, dragging it off, because it could happen very slowly, just a slow drag, and we'll be here talking and then we hear a crash. If I put it on the floor, it has nowhere to fall. I just got to be careful not to step on it. Then when Planet Cryo says just do it, we can put the Nike swoosh underneath the footprint on the motherboard. This thing is heavy. This is definitely a two-handed operation. Let me just find a little hidey spot down here. Oh. Okay, so the liquid cooler radiator is a little tricky because it wants to pull the motherboard off the box. So let me just bear with me here for a second while I try and find a Cirque du Soleil contortion routine for the board and radiator to work with each other instead of against each other. Hopefully that'll hold it. Now, the case. You've never seen this case before because I've never seen this case before. It's never made an appearance on the show before. It was half price. It was $99 instead of $199. Oops. And let's bring this over. Not quite sure how we're going to bring this up. Let me move this out of the way so I don't knock it over, because this is a big boy. Chunky. That's heavy when it's empty. Just wait till I put that heavy motherboard and radiator in there. And that, I really don't like these big cases. I really don't, but I really do like a good deal. So I'm willing to alter my expectations or my requirements according to price. The more something costs, the less likely I am going to be negotiable on what I want, whether that means the color I want, the size I want, the manufacturer I might want. Some things are worth waiting for because they're a good deal. Some things are worth buying because they're a good deal. And some things, it's almost like just take my money and give me that thing. And some things are, not at any price will I ever have that. So this falls somewhere in the middle between, it's a good quality case, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just bigger than I prefer. I wouldn't buy it for $200. Clearly, for $100 I will. But I've noticed there are no fans in this whatsoever. So for that $100, I don't even get a rear case fan, nothing. This is a dual chamber, right? So we've got that whole side here to hide our cabling, to put our power supply. And it is made by Corsair. They're a good quality case manufacturer. This is our documentation. This is all you get. I don't know how useful this is. That's not even documented. That's safety and compliance. So somewhere in here, there's probably some documentation. Now, I think this glass just pulls open like a door, and I say that because I just noticed there's hinges on it. There's like a Levi's tag, like you see on the back of your pants, right there. I don't know why there's a fabric tab on this, unless it's to use it as a pull handle. I suppose that's what that is. And we'll set that aside because, you know, we're going to have that off to put our radiator in anyway. With regards to this door, it looks like there's nowhere to open this door, but the foot right down here, it has a recess. And if we pull on that, that's apparently the handle to the door. I don't see any other way that you could open this door. There's no handle, there's no tab. So it's pretty well integrated into the case. It's a pretty nice design. And we should be able to lift up on this and just take it off and get it out of our way. This adds a lot of weight to the case. Tempered glass is pretty heavy compared to just, say, a metal side panel. And you usually have to give them some light encouragement to pop off of those hinges. Now, we've seen some cases where these slide right off easily. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, right, that it sits securely. I also want to make sure that we don't have any locking pins in here. So let me get my glasses and take a closer look. Usually they just slide up. Oh. I see is that a screw right there? I think that's a screw. Right on top of the hinge. Yeah. All right, let's not lose that. That's going to be pretty important. Now does it slide up? Oh, now it just pulls right off. No force is required. We have seen some that slide right off. Some require a little bit of encouragement. This one has a screw that secures it in place, so it's not going anywhere. First time I've ever seen that. Now we do have this plastic on both sides. I'm just removing it from the inside for right now, because that'll always be the one that I forget. Once we're all done and we're looking at it and going ooh and ah, we're looking through a foggy piece of plastic that suddenly gets so much nicer looking when you take the plastic off. Now we have a lot of room in here, and we can put the radiator up on top. We can put the radiator up in the front. We can use what looks like a rear connector motherboard on here, because you see all these cutouts. These look like it'll take a rear connector board. I'm not sure why you would do that, since you're not really going to see the cables on this anyway with that dark smoky panel. We have another Velcro fabric thing here that looks like this is for routing your cables through back here. And you can remove it all together. But I guess you could run your video and everything down through here. Or we've got a groove under here, which is likely the filter for the underside of the case. But sometimes the cases can run cables under there. I don't think any cable should be exposed under a case. And I think that, you know, whenever a case does that, I lose a little respect for the case manufacturer if you see any cables under here. But this is your bottom filter, which likely comes out from the front, right? So you would clean this, and you don't have to do anything special other than grab onto this handle, slide it out, and blow that out once or twice a year. And then you don't have to put the case on its side, and you don't have to worry about one of those frameless screens that you can't see, but it just slides in and locks in place. It's really easy. Let's bring it back up and take the rear panel off so we can get a good look all the way around. It's got to come off anyway. Up on top, we have 4 USB Type A's. That's fantastic. We have a power button. We have a reset button. We have a Type C USB. And we have a headphone jack or microphone jack or headset jack. Whatever you plug into it, you got that one. These thumb screws are captive. So if we unscrew these, just like so. I see pull tabs right here, so I guess you pull it, yep. And then that's our screen here. Now inside, we've got a very clever design where the hard drive tray holds 3.5-inch drives inside of it, and 2.5-inch drives clip on to the outsides. I like that they keep them all together. And inside of the box that I'm pointing at, which is right here, inside of that hard drive tray is the box that contains all the screws and components that come with the case for installation of your parts. So let me find a place to put this where I won't break it. I'll move that away from the glass. Don't let me forget where I put that. You know I'm going to be looking for that later. We have, I don't know, is this a flaw in the case here? We have a little plastic right here. I don't know what that is. Let me see if I can, almost looks like a water spot. Get my magnifying glasses out here. Yeah, maybe that's why it was on sale. I fixed it. I don't know what that was. Now, because this doesn't have any fans, or we're also not dealing with any fan controllers, and if you were doing a custom liquid cooler, this would be, well, a dream system to work on in that regard, because you'll have room for custom tubing and custom reservoir. There's this whole section right here that seems pointless to me. I'm not sure what that's for. It looks like it comes out, but I don't know why it would come out. Like, what would you do with it? I'm seeing screws that hold this cover in. I see a place we could put the radiator vertically, which likely will be more attractive. But it means if we do that, we've got to come in, we've got to remove this screen. We've got to come in from the front to mount that radiator. And that just pulls off. That's good. Good to see. So far, this design is really easy. And I wonder if this whole piece comes out for the radiator. But the way I would do this is I would place the radiator here on the outside. And to do that, I'll have to take the fans. Remember I said yesterday, we may have to take the fans off. Take the fans off, but I would put all the fans exactly where they are, but I would screw them in so that they sandwich in between this piece and the radiator. So the fans are still going to blow the same direction. That way we can see all the RGB. If we put the radiator up here, we are not going to see that RGB. It's going to be very difficult being up on top because it's going to shine down. I also have a habit of putting things on top of a computer, like the motherboard box. And if I do that when the system's on and the radiator's up here, I will likely run into a heat issue. So because I know I do that, my preference is to have the radiator up front. There's enough room on here where we don't have to sit the radiator in the recess. I think we could also put the radiator right up against this and secure it in this way like we would a fan. Although you could put fans in on either side because we have so much room going all the way back to the motherboard tray. We have all that room. I'm just thinking about what looks best, really. It looks like we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws, and maybe this whole piece comes out. I don't know. There's one way to find out, though. Huh. Okay, so there's little clips back here. If you notice, there are little clips here, and that's what's holding the front panel on, are those little clips. So there's no reason to take these off, as far as I can tell. They would stay attached to the frame. If we can get the frame out of there, that'll make the install, I don't know if it'll be easier, it'll be different. But I suppose the first thing we need to do is get the motherboard installed. I'm just making sure that I've got everything open and accessible. It looks like the top frame is screwed in as well. This looks like it all comes apart. This top piece right here looks like it comes off. I'm not sure why you would take it off, but it looks like, you know, you can have this fully open and work on it if you were building, you know, something really complex in there. These are not removable panels, so this does not support a vertical GPU. Everything will go in a traditional way. Yeah, this is a big case. Power supply will go in right down here. Now, unfortunately, they don't give us a removable frame for that, but it's easy to access. But once we put that in, it's going to block any access to any wiring we need to do back here. So I would wait on that. And then the aforementioned parts box is right inside of the hard drive tray. And it looks like this is kind of clever. All right, we'll give him kudos for this. It looks like you're going to slide your drives in and out from the outside of the case. That's clever. It's going to make access a lot easier than having to open up, swing a door open, or in this case, take the entire back off, exposing all the cable management. And you can just remove that little door. And then these are your drive sleds right here. And look at the nice little plastic container they give us with these screws all organized. So you can see you do get more for $200, right? So at $100, because I don't necessarily need more, certainly seems like a much better value for the money for everything that they're including. So there's your first drive tray, and then that's your second drive sled there. And you're going to want to use the screws that come with this to mount your drives in there. These two, I don't know how well the camera's picking this up with everything being black, but there are two 2.5-inch drive holders right here. So you would secure your 2.5-inch SSD or mechanical right onto that. It latches onto these holes right there, and then just push it up and screw that down. Or you could take these out entirely if for any reason you're trying to lighten this thing. I don't think you're going to lighten it by anything you notice, but it would definitely scientifically lighten it by a couple, maybe an ounce if you took those out. But they're not in the way of anything, so you might as well leave them. We got the Corsair logo embedded right into the motherboard tray, where the motherboard will cover it and no one will see it. It says Corsair back here. This rear panel looks like it just pops straight out with one screw. Just notice that. Let's see if that's right. Is that what it appears to be, or is there more to it? No, a very familiar design. If you wanted to put your radiator along the side, ooh, I think I like this idea even better. Then we can have our fans straight forward. I like that. I think that's better than putting them up front or putting them on top. Now, if you were somebody that wanted a liquid cooler for your graphics card and a liquid cooler for your CPU and a liquid cooler for something else, you could put 3 giant liquid coolers in this. From what I can tell, you're looking at a couple of 420s, certainly 360s, which is about as big as they make them for either top, front, or side. So I think we're going to use this. And then what we would do in this design is we would stick with, let's see. Well, that'll be an easier install. We can leave all the fans on the radiator, right? Because the fans will be in the front where we can see the RGB. And then stick to our original plan where we just screw the back of the radiator right onto the plate. This plate is not recessed like it is in the Leon Lee. It doesn't have a big indentation. It's rather shallow, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So there's no way you would mount anything to the back of this because you're going to be right up against your panel. So anything would mount to this other side. That's easy. There's no guessing there. It's really obvious. That's going to make this job a lot easier. So again, when we're spending more money for the case, it's reasonable to expect to get more case for the money. That means bigger case. It means a well-built case, something you could stand on that wouldn't collapse under your weight necessarily. Also, I don't know why you'd be standing on it, but that's just built like a tank. It also adds weight, though. It makes it heavier. So if you're shipping or delivering this computer, I hope you're in good shape, or you have some sort furniture mover or something, because once we get this board and the radiator put in there, that board and radiator are already a good 12, 15 pounds. This is probably a good 40 to 50 pounds, I'd guess. We could look up the weight online. And then we're going to add all that together. We're easily, without a GPU, it's going to be somewhere between 50 and 65 pounds, I'm going to guess. That is heavy. For me, it is. And lift with your knees is all I can tell you. Cases like this, I kind of wish I had the option to add wheels on them, just so they're easy to roll them around to get them out of the way for vacuuming or cleaning. It's going to be very discouraging to try and move this case for one individual to do it, unless you're really young and in really good shape and you appreciate the opportunity to have a little exercise. Otherwise, it'll probably sit for quite some time because it's so discouraging to move it. And the good news is whatever part of the floor it's sitting over will remain crystal clear clean. And then 7 years later, when you move it for the first time, you'll realize, wow, look at what my floor used to look like 7 years ago. On the other hand, you're also not going to load this up with a bunch of mechanical drives either. It's only got room for 2 in here. So despite the fact that there's lots of room, theoretically, you're not going to have much when you're left over, because with the power supply going underneath the drive cage, right? And then we've got our radiator here, and then our cabling that has to go in here. The only other place you would have to place drives would be right up in the front, which would just look terrible. It's just another way that we're seeing all of this older technology being phased out. I was just reading LG is no longer making Blu-ray drives. Sony hasn't made Blu-ray drives in a long time. There was another manufacturer. They're all done except for one. Panasonic is the last Blu-ray drive maker. So soon, that'll be the end of that, and whatever Blu-ray drives exist will be pre-existing inventory. Once it sells out, we all move on. So just a heads up on that. That just was in the news the other day, which was coincidental since we were just talking about this. I'm actually surprised that LG didn't stop making those Blu-ray drives years ago. But you're not going to put a Blu-ray or a DVD or a CD in a modern case for the most part. There are still a few hangers-on, but they're few and far to choose from. And this is how we're moving forward, as we move away from that internal storage dependence into more of external storage, NAS, and cloud-based. Either way, we're getting it out of the computer, unless it's a server, right? In which case, that's a whole different genre of computer building that we don't do here, because most people are going to buy pre-built servers from Dell and other what do they call them? Just pre-built machines that they have a warranty. You get them out of the box. They're system integrators, SIs, and they are turnkey solutions. I want to say ready to eat. Right? You can go to the store, you could buy some raw chicken. You can't eat that. It's not ready. Well, you could. You shouldn't. It's not ready to eat. But then you could buy cooked chicken. You just rip it out of the package. You don't have to cook it. You can eat it cold. It tastes delicious. So I'm thinking turnkey, and I'm saying ready to eat, but more or less it means you take it out of the package and you start using it. No preparation and no additional work is necessary. And many big companies, it's cheaper for them to simply order a machine from a system integrator as a server than it is to pay their internal staff to build it. They just pay their internal staff to maintain it. Sometimes they don't even do that. Sometimes they just pay their internal staff to configure it and install it, and then any warranty work is done by the people they bought it from, Dell or HP. Mara reminded me the other day of an old IBM computer for Magic Server Pixie Dust. And they ran these ads in the 90s, and they were really well done ads. Clearly people in the industry knew what they were talking about. So a lot of times marketing is disconnected from engineering, right? So in this case, the engineering in this marketing is correct. And they basically, a bunch of people sitting around a conference table and said, you know, he's got a little bowl of glitter. Say, what's this? And the IT guy, or the leader of the IT department, at this table with management says, that's magic server pixie dust. And he says, is it cheap? He says, it's very cheap. It's made of soy, biodegradable. What does it do? Well, anytime you have a server problem, you just put some magic server pixie dust on it and it automatically fixes it. And then the voiceover comes over and said, you know, that's only in a dream, unless you buy our IBM self-healing servers, because there is no such thing as magic server pixie dust. And until there is, we have this technology that's basically the same thing, but it's only available if you buy an IBM server. I just thought that was really clever. So we're going to get ourselves some magic server pixie dust, and we'll see if it can work now. It's been a few years, maybe the technology's come along. If you want to see that commercial, just type it into YouTube, search magic server pixie dust. It's a short ad and they're pretty hilarious. Let me jump over to the chat room here and see what you guys are saying. David Graham says hello. Welcome in, David. I don't think my chat room is updating. Let me refresh here. Ah, that's better. Barry Klein says hello. Yeah, Sony, that was the other name, right? Sony's not making the Blu-ray drives. LG's not making them. There was one other big manufacturer, Samsung. Samsung doesn't make them. So the only one left is Panasonic. Jonathan says, I am liking this case more and more. Yeah, for $99, me too. I just don't want to have to move it. Phil Stodd says hello. Welcome in, Phil, along with the Bajan guy, Richard DeFries, joining us from Ireland. Terry says hello. There's Eric Turner joining us, and Scott Loosemore says hello. Of course, Mara's hanging out in there with y'all. Nick Poverman says, don't drop that on your foot. Right? Certainly not on your toes. Mats Olof joins us from Sweden. I want to say Sweden. Basically, we've got worldwide viewers, and it's really cool. I'm always tickled to think that we can turn the camera on here in Phoenix and have people not only in Phoenix watch us, but all over the entire globe, which is so cool. Classified says hello. Matt says, are you going to use the flash drive that came with the board? No, the information on the flash drive will be outdated, so the flash drive will stay in the motherboard box along with all the other parts that are part of this case or part of the components that we've used for warranty purposes or for the owner of this computer, whoever that turns out to be. That's theirs, not mine. So right now, I have temporary custody of this. It's sort of, think of this as a foster home for computers until we find a good loving home for them. And again, we're selling these all locally now. This would be ridiculous to try and ship this. It would cost you so much money. You'd say, well, I could just buy these parts myself. And yeah, that's the whole point of the videos. I'm not, nor have I ever been here to sell you guys stuff. That sort of came about through my own naivety when I started showing people how to build computers. It never occurred to me that people would ask me to build them for them. And so it started out with like one person asking, and I thought, sure, why not? And then I thought, hey, I could, you know, as more people started asking, I could shift my business model. But then it got a little discouraging because support got difficult. Customers were complaining that we're waiting too long. Products were getting damaged in shipping. And it was frustrating for both me and the customer to try and assist them with any tech support issues when they're so far away. And I have to rely on them to explain what they're seeing. And if they're not looking at it, they're not seeing it. In other words, they're looking at it, but they don't know what they're looking at. How do they describe that to me if it doesn't look out of the ordinary to them? When if I see it in person, I can say, bam, there it is. I've seen some people use Facebook, Messenger to FaceTime or other ways that they can hold a camera. And I have found that to be very frustrating. People don't know how to film. They move the camera around too much. There's no good lighting. They go, it's right here. And then they move it's like, hold on a minute. It didn't even come into focus. You're moving it so quickly. It's an exercise in frustration to try and work that way. And so for everybody's happiness and sanity, along with the price of shipping going up, shipping's taking longer. Well, now it's time to pivot away from that and just keep everything local. Now, mini PCs, that's a different story, right? Mini PCs can be shipped here within the US, but exporting things out to other countries is, again, it gets to be so much money. It doesn't make any sense to just not buy the thing locally. But in any event, it's been an interesting ride so far, as a lot of things that I intended to do had consequences, both good and bad, like creating this community. This likely would have never happened without going live. And that's why it's so important for me to go live. It's not only to show you the real time things take, the real misunderstandings that I even have working on a first time piece of hardware, and how I figure it out and how I figured it out using critical thinking. We demonstrate that. We prove it. It's not something that somebody says that's a setup or that's not real. We're living in a world where everybody is starting to think that everything is fake. And it's getting more and more difficult to tell what's real from what's fake. And the best thing I can do, and the whole reason I even started the channel, was to make videos to prove everything, that because people on the internet like to argue. So I'm like, okay, using a leaf blower damages a computer. Well, let me show you me using a leaf blower. Didn't damage it. Okay, well, you got lucky. Okay, I'll leaf blow another one. After about 25 of demonstrations of different computers using a leaf blower, never once causing any damage, all of the naysayers went away. They're gone now. Then they started saying you can't spin the fans that fast. Well, unlike them, who are just mouthing, I say, watch, we're going to run this fan as fast as leaf blower will run it until the battery in the leaf blower burns out. What's wrong with the fan? Nothing. So then those naysayers go away. It's very easy to make claims without any proof or evidence based on fear, anxiety, and misinformation. It's happening more and more and more. PC World made a very, in my opinion, irresponsible post that Microsoft was allowing the installation of Windows 11 without TPM, that they had backed off of that requirement. And they linked a support article, right? And so all these people say, oh, I knew that was going to happen. I knew Microsoft was going to back off. Nobody read the article, including the journalist who wrote, and I'm going to use the word journalist loosely here, the clickbait from PC World that is completely misconstrued, and I do believe was done intentionally in order to feed people what they wanted to hear, to generate clicks that then shared across social media, that generated more clicks and conversation about how this was a thing when people are just reading the headline, or even reading the PC World article itself still implies that Microsoft backed off. But what PC World is citing is a link to a Microsoft support page that has no instruction on how to bypass TPM requirements. It's not there. Even though they're saying it's there, it isn't. And even though PC World is a trusted source, not anymore. They're just not a trusted source anymore. Ever since PC World sold off their magazine and now just went to online only, the quality of their journalism has become high schoolish, poorly written, and inaccurate. I really loved PC World for decades, and it's sad that they just didn't close the doors, because as sad as I would have been if they would have shut it down, this is embarrassing for them to publish as a well-respected, previously well-respected journalist in this space, or news provider in the space. Most of what they review now, is my understanding, they're paid to review, so it's not a review. That's a lie. That's a commercial. The second thing is false information in order to generate clicks, putting money over accuracy. Now it's about how do we generate more clicks, how do we get more clickbaity titles, and the whole integrity of the magazine is completely dissolved so far as I can tell. I encourage you, when you see these articles, even from what was once a reputable journalistic publication, they did provide the link from which they based the article. And if you read that link, which apparently all these commenters did not do, in nowhere does Microsoft give you instruction on how to bypass TPM. All they say is if you bypass the TPM, you get no warranty, you get no, the support you get is not promised, and it is an extraordinarily unwise thing. Nothing's changed. The only thing that changed was this author's interpretation of what they read, and they're hungry for those clicks. And a combination of those two things, and I can't say for sure which one was over the other, but either they didn't know what they were talking about or they knew exactly what they were doing for the purpose of we're talking about it right now, right? That worked. But please don't be so gullible. It's okay to be skeptical, but it's another thing to make false claims like, oh, if you spin the fans too fast, or blowing out with the leaf blower. So that's why I started making videos. My thought was, you can't argue with it. I'm going to prove it rather than just say it, because that's what everybody on the internet does. It's just, you're just supposed to believe me if I talk with confidence. If I sound confident and you're unsure, you just assume, well, that guy knows what he's talking about. No, most of the time they don't. So what we're looking for are citations or references to where they're getting their information and evaluating what source their information was, as you should be evaluating what source your information is coming from, or you're going to end up just repeating false information like all these other people are doing right now on social media regarding this false headline that Microsoft has backed away from TPM requirements. When just a few days ago, Microsoft literally said, we are not backing away from these TPM requirements. We're not backing down from this. It's not an option. The internet's dangerous. And to back down when so many corporations would be at risk would put us out of business. So, will Microsoft change their mind between now and October? Some people believe that's going to happen. I think these people are delusional. But maybe I'm the delusional one. None of us have a crystal ball. That operating system is pretty old. It's time to go. Now, whether or not you'll be able to buy another year of support for $30 for a Windows 10 computer, Microsoft says yes. They've never done that before, so I'll be interested to see how Microsoft executes this for individuals. They've always done it for companies, but it's for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. For $30 for an individual is pretty strange. But the antivirus in Windows 10 will continue to get updates until 2028. You just won't get any operating system updates, features, or upgrades because they're not going to invest any more money on that. That doesn't make it safe to use. Windows 10 is still, when end of life or end of support comes October 14th of 2025. Anybody using the operating system in 2026, making a big error in judgment, in my opinion. But if you got nothing to lose, that's your call. But I want you to make an informed decision. All right, let me set the case down flat. Let's get the motherboard put in here. And, let's see. That's what the panel's off. Just imagine how much heavier that's going to get. Let's turn this way so you can see it. Now, we're going to need this in a minute. We won't need this for ever. We won't need that because we're not putting any SATA drives in there. But again, whoever this goes to, whoever buys it, they have that option, even though I wouldn't do it. If it's not mine, none of my business. Let's see. So the motherboard and radiator, this should be interesting. There's a part of me that says just take the water block off. It would be so much easier. And there's a part of me that says, hold my beer. I don't care. I can handle it. Let's see if that ends up being a big mistake in judgment on my part. But I think I can do it. I think I can. Oh, it's heavy. And I don't want to damage the radiator. As I mentioned, the radiator is made of a very soft metal. So besides not damaging it, I don't want to scratch it up. It's all brand new stuff. Let me just rotate that around a little bit. See if we can get that to line up. I probably should have counted the standoffs that were pre-installed before I did this. You think I've done this enough times? Okay, well, it just seated down onto one of the posts of one of the standoffs there. And I know there should be 3 down each side, 3 across the middle, a total of 9. Let's just see if we have any more than that. 1, 2, 3. 1. Uh-oh, where's my middle one? Oh, the NVMe heatsink covers up the middle one. But in this particular case, that middle one is a post. It doesn't take a screw anyway, so that works for me. I'm good with that. Over here towards me, we've got, yeah, 1 there, 1 there, 1 there. So 3 across the top, 1, 2, 3 across the bottom, and then 1 and 2 with a hidden one across the middle. Sometimes there's a 4th one underneath, you know, right around this part here. Sometimes the boards are so long they may have additional screws, but this board takes it right to the edge. And I'm looking right now and I see that all of the connectors for SATA and USB 3, they're all sideways on this board. And that's beautiful because this case has all the grommets under the board right there, which means we can come in with the cables from behind the motherboard and go through these grommets this way and just flip the cable right like that. That's going to make it virtually like a Project Zero build where you're not going to see any cables. They're going to be very minimally seen. When I get this back up on its feet, I'm going to show you how neat that is. I don't think I could have planned this better. Very cool. All right, so let's see which of these screws holds the board down. And all of the standoffs we're using were all pre-applied, so we don't have to move or add any. Now in this box, they're giving us one of these unifying adapters so that we can plug our power switch, reset switch. No, it's the opposite. The power switch, reset switch are on a unified plug. And if for any reason you need to split them out, then you would plug this into your unified plug and it'll split them out old school. So we won't use that. We got a bunch of nylon zip ties here. We've got some plastic dividers. That's for this organization unit if you want to create your own little compartments. We've got some shoulder, really funky, what the heck? Wow, I have never seen a screw like this before. Let me show you how this works. And I'm going to guess this is for mounting 3.5-inch drives into the rails. I can't imagine where else this would be used. So normally a screw has a thread on it, right? And that thread is either a coarse thread or a fine thread. And if you look at this screw, it has 1 thread. You can just barely see one. I mean, technically, I guess they're all just 1. But look at how wide. That is the widest thread I have ever seen. And I'm going to guess, given the end of that looking rounded as it does, that is likely for mounting a hard drive into the tray. That is different. They must do more than that because they gave us a bunch of them. And then we've got some washers here. This bag here is what I'm going to guess are a motherboard mounting screws. And then we've got a bag of real teeny tiny screws here. These are likely for mounting SSDs. They're a very fine threaded, shallow screw that you don't want to go in too deep into the SSD and hit the circuit board in it. So these will be shorter, finer threads. So if we were putting a SATA SSD in there, or a SATA, even a SATA mechanical drive, sometimes optical drives, if you had a case that used this, if you had a case that could utilize an optical drive, these are the size screws that you would use for those. All of those universally use a finer thread screw. So I don't think there's anything we need here. And that's all there is. I mean, overall, we have 1 extra motherboard standoff in here. That's it. These are not resealable bags, but I don't know why they're in bags to begin with when they're already in a container that was in a case that was closed, that was in a box. I suppose the support call of, hey, I didn't get any screws, probably never happens when you cut it. like Russian nesting dolls in here. It's got to be these. I mean, statistically, logically, without reading any documentation, it should be, using critical thinking, pretty obvious. But I could be wrong. And you know how I'll know? By stopping talking about it and actually doing it. Move that over there. Now if I turn this, you might be able to see what I'm doing when we go up here to this point here. You kind of get a view that you don't normally see without a handheld camera. And oftentimes it's too dark in there for you to see anything. And so by this being open and this being open, got some light. Now the fact that that's not tightening means either I don't have it lined up or I've got the wrong screw. Or the motherboard's not sitting flat. Let's see. No, there's a standoff under there. I can't see it, but I can feel it. And it may be that with that armor in the back, you've got to make sure it's seated flat, and it may be kind of tilted up a little bit here. So let me try with the electric driver just so I can put a little more pressure down. No, it's not. The motherboard is not lined up correctly with the standoff. They're close. They're a little off. So I'm going to need to wiggle this just a little bit here and just verify it's not wiggling. I need a flashlight. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. It wasn't wiggling left or right, but it just moves forward and backward. I don't know how much of that you saw, but that's a lot of movement. So I'm surprised at that there would be that much movement. I need to push it down away from me. Wow. Then I just fell off the Lazy Susan. That doesn't feel natural. So I can see the standoff, and the board, it just needs to get moved back towards this way. I'm surprised there's that much play in it, because I really thought it was gonna, that center post should sit right down and lock it in. There's no way that center post is in there, or that board wouldn't move that much. So whatever I felt when I felt the board sink down had to be the board sinking down where the armor is to where the standoff is, but the standoff is still not lined up with the hole because it should sink down one more time. That's a little deceiving, but it kind of makes sense because that armor on the back of the board has little cutouts in it. So when the armor is sitting on top of the standoff, the board is very obviously too high. And then when the board sat down, I falsely thought it was the little pin in the standoff going through the mounting hole. For all I know, this case doesn't even have that. I'm assuming it. In order for me to verify it, I have to take the heatsink off of the NVMe drive because I cannot see the center post. So I don't know what choice I have other than playing with it to see if it does finally sit, or if I'm wasting my time. Ooh, that felt pretty positive right there. That locked in. Boards usually of this caliber, or cases of this caliber, usually have the little center standoff as a pin, so it holds the board in for you. But that feels much better. Let's see if I can get this started now. What a difference, and those are the right screws. So I'm not accustomed to that much resistance where the board is wanting to come back a little bit, but it's in doing so, it's ensuring to me that we've got a good solid ground from the rear I/O to the back of the metal case. Sometimes I wonder. Now, I just saw the whole board tilt down back here as I was tightening that screw, which makes me wonder if it's sitting on something that's holding it up. This isn't going to damage the board unless there's something metal that it's sitting on. Sometimes it's that rear armor that doesn't go well with your case, and it's usually just a couple of screws to take it off. Other times, what we're seeing bend is actually the armor in the back, but I'm going to continue on and just see if we reach any points where it doesn't look right. So far back here, it looks fantastic. It's just unusual to see a board bend like that, and it's not bending anywhere else. It was just in the top corner. Well, take it back. I just saw the bottom now seat down an additional 5 or 6 millimeters, which is significant movement. And I don't know what we're fighting against. You'd think gravity would just have that resting right down without any further movement necessary. And it's almost impossible to see what's going on here. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to put all the screws in. 1, 2, 3. I need one more over here. Yeah, that side. So again, if that middle post isn't exactly centered, it may be that the middle post is holding the center of the board up, causing us to have to, essentially what could be happening is something in the middle, such as that middle post, isn't centered through the hole, and so it's holding the board up a little bit, and then we're effectively creating a little umbrella by pushing it down on the edges like this. Or it's possible we are through that hole correctly. I can't see it with the NVMe heatsink in the way. Not a big deal to take the heatsink off. I'm just trying to be optimistic about it. We'll see how far that gets me. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's all of the screws for the motherboard. Then the next thing will be our radiator. So the radiator is going to go in with these hoses facing down, because that's what's going to be the most pleasing. And which direction are we going here? We're going to go this way, aren't we? So we're going to face it just like this. Is it going to fit? That's the next question. Will it fit? It's a tight fit, but I think it's going. Remember, the cooler is not made by Corsair. It may be too tight of a fit here. Let me move all these screws back in here. We're done with those. Once I get the radiator secured, then I can take a better look at what's going on behind the motherboard. I suspect it's just tight. I just want to verify that before I apply power. It's when you apply power to it, if anything's wrong, that you'll potentially cause damage. We'll just put it that way. If I bring this up on its feet very carefully so the radiator doesn't fall, you'll be able to see what I'm working with now. So the idea is that we would bring this in all the way back here, and we're going to have to angle it to do this. And this is why it's difficult when it's already attached, when the water block's already attached to the CPU. We also have a lot of cables back here we're going to fight around, most of which are the fan power cables and such. So by moving it to the back, I think it's going to be a much cleaner look, but it also means I'm kind of doing this the hard way because I have to work around pre-installed parts with a pre-installed part. Now you can see we have, these are the grommets I was talking about right here. So we can run our cables right here, and then the motherboard connectors are all facing on a right angle. I'm looking directly at the headers instead of having to come to the front of the board. I go to the side, so I'm coming from the side to the side for the USB, for the SATA. I didn't realize that when I bought the case or the board, that these would match up so nicely. I'm hoping to have this much luck with this radiator. The radiator is going to sit all the way to the back, behind all these rubber grommets. We have to get it back here somehow, some way, and hopefully the hose will reach. And all I'm trying to do is get it through all of the obstacles, and then it's going to align just like this. And then those cables aren't going to be seen. These are all the cables for the fans, and we're going to reroute the power cable. It's still going to plug into the same place on the motherboard, but we'll route around it instead of around the front. And then what that leaves us with now is a case that will have a very common look to the aquarium style cases, in the sense that, if I can get this back up on the bench, on the Lazy Susan, I mean, get an idea what this is going to look like when it's mounted. And so instead of these fans just being for looks, which in many cases they are, these will actually provide a practical purpose for blowing air through the radiator that keeps our CPU cool, while at the same time providing us RGB and something pretty to look at. Okay, so that's the worst of it. I mean, really everything else is power supply, securing the radiator to the bracket, and then hooking up the umbilicals, right, which is going to be very easy on this build. We'll be able to put the top back on. We don't need to leave this open, but I will for now, just because it improves access. Same with the front. If I need to get in here for anything, look how easy that is. On a lot of cases, this is sealed and this is sealed, so to be able to have access like that, and look how well the board looks in there as far as the I/O shield matching this case. It looks like they were meant to be together, even though the case is Corsair, the motherboard is MSI. MSI makes their own cases as well. And again, the radiator and cooler made by EKWB. This is what we would call industry standards. And when they're followed, when they're obeyed, things go a lot smoother. The minute you start buying these janky parts from bizarre manufacturers you never heard of, it might go well, it might not go so well. You can always make it work. It just depends on how much work you have to put into it. Things should just fit like a glove. When it's all done right, there should be no frustration, unless you're just doing it wrong. But these parts are so easy, it's pretty difficult to do wrong. It's just making poor decisions at part selection, because you're trying to save $5. That's usually why it happens. Or something just looks so pretty you've got to have it, when in fact it's just junk. It's like a pretty perfume bottle where the perfume smells terrible, but the bottle is gorgeous. They do that with liquor too. You know, beautiful bottle of tequila, and the tequila tastes like paint thinner. Let's see, or vodka. I don't want to pick on tequila, any of the spirits. Any of the ones that have the fancy bottles, I'm very skeptical. Sometimes the best vodkas or the best spirits come in the best bottles. But how do you tell them apart without trying them? And they're expensive. Those aren't your cheap spirits. You want to go to the liquor store and get yourself the cheapest grain alcohol you can get. Woo, I remember those days. The days of, was it Boone's Farm? $2 Chuck? That was the cheap stuff. We were young, we didn't have any money, and our livers were new. Robert Kachina with a €5 super chat says, hello, Carey from Slovenia. For the Gatorade drink, I love your live shows. So, well, speaking of Slovenia, aren't the EKWB parts we're using made in Slovenia? Isn't that what they say? I'm pretty sure EKWB is based out of Slovenia. Anyway, fun little coincidence. Let's grab our bracket. Now the way we're going to mount this means I can just go ahead and put the bracket right back in there, because we need to have a secure way to mount the radiator here. And we'll just come at it from the other side as far as holding the radiator in place up against these slots. Let's see. Which screw did I take out for that? Was it this one? I guess it was this one. Because that one went to something else, didn't it? I think they're the same screw. But it turns out I could have just, I guess I could have just left that in this whole time. Okay, so that takes us back to the bag of screws we have left over from yesterday. We don't want to confuse the case screws with the radiator screws. They're not going to fit using the wrong ones for either case. So that's why it's important to stay organized here, or you're going to be working harder than you need to and potentially damaging your own parts. And that's not a warranty issue when you're the one who screwed it up, right? If you would just follow the steps. Now I can see already we're going to have to reroute some of these cables to the other side of this bracket, but that's going to be so much easier to do, I think, once we don't have to hold on to the radiator anymore. So I can either take care of that now before we screw things down, but then I always have to, I've got the rear bracket that has to come off, and then I've got the front radiator to hold on to manually. Well, I guess I use my third hand to push the cables back in. So I think just going ahead and mounting the radiator first, at least with 2 screws, that'll hold it in place for us, and then that reduces my need for a third hand. Just in case we decide, you know what, we need to take this radiator back out, we don't need to put all 8 screws back or all 12 screws back into it. We do need to lift it up in order for the screws to align. And I am having a little bit of a seating issue here at the bottom, but in theory, that should fit perfectly if I raise it up high enough. And then I'm having an issue on this side now that I think is a result of our cables being in the way. That's what I think is happening. So what I'm going to do, just want to verify what's going on here. I'm going to lift up on this a little bit more. I'm going to feel the edge to make sure nothing's blocking us. It's just slightly off. I can't see why yet, but there's a reason. It almost feels like the radiator's a little too tall for this position, but it's so close, I feel like with a little tenacity we should be able to get that in there. I'm also wondering if my assessment was wrong in putting this piece back is maybe making it harder. Let me take the piece back off. Let's try another approach. Let's bring this down now that the radiator's attached, and we can pull all these wires forward. Again, we could reroute these wires right through these, see where my hand is? Right through these grommets here. And then get them out of the way of this support piece that might be blocking us. But in the meantime, let me just pull the cables forward. And let's see, will that fit in? Look at what's going on down here. Will the radiator sit inside of this piece? Oh, it is a little too tall. Ha! Isn't that interesting? Wait a minute, maybe it's just got to be more precisely inserted. Maybe I need to pay closer attention, and let me close this before everything spills out, or just get it out of the way. Because this should, I mean, so far everything has fit so easily. I have to assume I'm missing something, or it's got to be just an exact precise fit. Wow, that is so close. Now, I think if we had used a Corsair cooler of the same size, it wouldn't be as thick as this cooler and probably would sit in there with less negotiation, coercion. There are, and I don't know how well the camera will pick it up, but at the very top, there's a metal hook right here, and down here at the bottom. Very thin metal hook that could be easily bent that probably hooks into something to secure it to the case. So if we bend them, then it may not secure straight, but I mean, there is only one screw holding this on. So those hooks are kind of important. On the other hand, are they? I mean, if we're just talking about a couple millimeters, not even a millimeter here at the back, the cooler is, what's happening is this piece of the cooler, this large piece, is wider than those hooks by, well, it's more than a millimeter. It's a good 2 or 3. But it's really, really close. And if the cooler were this much shorter in length, it would fit underneath of them in both top and bottom. But it's right up against the top. And it looks like one hook can stay and one hook needs to be bent away. That's a brute force method I am not a fan of, I'll tell you that right now. But I think it's going to be necessary without changing the cooler. Okay, lost my audio. Apologize for that. I'm trying to debate on moving one hook up here or one hook down there. I'm also debating what their purpose is. They almost look like they're there for cable management and not for support. Or I move the cooler, as I mentioned earlier, up to the top or to the front. But I'll tell you, this is really the look I want. I don't normally recommend, grabbing a set of pliers and manipulating the metal on the case. But this is in the back, no one's going to see it. And even if we put a smaller cooler in 3 years from now, that metal is no longer in the way and it's already bent. I don't even think anybody would notice it anyway. I'm not quite sure why it's there, because it just seems to be in the way. I will say the EK water block, EKWB radiator is a bit longer than most, because they typically aren't much longer than the fans that attach. But we've got quite a bit of space here and here because of where they've located, or the way they've attached their hoses. So anyway, if the hoses were to attach vertically instead of horizontally, obviously this wouldn't be a problem. But as far as problems go, it seems pretty minor. With the key word being seams. I'm wondering if I have to bend both of those hooks down or if I can get away with just moving one of them. You see up here at the top, those hooks, there's one of the hooks right there. They're preventing us from going any higher. At the same time, all of our front port USBs and such are right there as well, and moving this higher may get in the way of them. Let me just take another look, see if I can picture what that would be if I moved that up. I mean, we're not moving up that much. You know what? I'm going to do it. These metal hooks, they need to be bent down. And for that, we're going to need to do a little case modification that you'd never see me do. So, time for something a little different. It's where critical thinking is going to help. And there's no documentation that's going to help you with this, right? Because no one can anticipate you're going to use that particular cooler and size and manufacturer with this case. All I want to do is push these hooks down. And I want to be careful not to break them off. I can always bend them back if I change my mind. We'll just bend them down. The more flush we can get them, and just push them down. It's a very thin metal, even using your thumb, and just feel it so it's flat. And that should allow us to raise the radiator up just a little bit more, and of course hold it in with the screws. So I think that's all we need to do. Let's come back here again. And if we wanted to avoid this, we would have stuck with a Corsair branded cooler. And even then, we've seen some struggles, like with Leon Lee, but more times than not, the case manufacturers who also make coolers design them so they both fit together. So if that were to go in there, let's try this. Let me hold that in with a screw here. It's leaning a little to the left, so let's just push it forward a little bit. Temporarily hold that in place and see if I can lift this radiator up now. Because I think that's what was keeping us from seating. Yep. That's it. Real easy. As far as I can tell, no downside to that. Now I do have my electric driver on a very low torque setting. As I mentioned, the radiators are very soft metal. And we're going to put one here, one here, one here, and just one more here. I'm not going to worry about the 8 in the center. You'll see that's where you want to be careful, because it sounded like it wanted to cross thread there, but it was just maybe a burr that was on there. Okay, now all of this cabling, as I mentioned, all of this can be pushed through the cable grommets here, and we can hook the same cables up just right here on the back. It'll all be hidden. It'll be nice, clean look. Oh, I think that's going to be just fine. Just fine. It's coming together. Oh yeah. Now that little piece, I said we're not going to use this because we're not putting any drives in here. So this little piece can go back on before I forget about it. I don't see any reason why we need that off now. But if there's any reason that we're trying to run some cables, let's say from the top of the board, this could be in the way and we may need to remove the cage. If we have to remove the cage, it looks like that also screws in from the back, 2 screws, and then it lifts out. And that would give us full access to the back of the board for any cables that we might need to run over there. Given that the radiator is not on top, we would normally run the fans, on top through these holes, and then this cage would probably be in your way. Then you could run your cables. After you run your cables, put the cage back in. So we'll keep that in mind as we move forward, but in order to just kind of keep everything together so I don't forget anything. How did this go in? There's a little lip on this, and it just goes right in there, and then that can just tighten up like so. Our power supply is going to go into that hole right there. It'll go in sideways. I suppose I should get that now. In the meantime, while I'm going to get that, yeah, I can't really see the back of the board here at all. With regards to what was causing that board to umbrella on me, I'd have to get some other angle on it. I'm assuming, there is a metal post here, and I'm assuming we're through it. Let me see with my flashlight. If you guys have questions for me, go ahead and ask now in the chat, and I'm going to be looking at the chat here in just a moment. Just trying to determine without taking that heatsink off. We're so close. I can't tell if it's through the hole or if the board's sitting on top of it. Remember, the board has this armor on it. And the armor, you can see the armor of the back of the board right there. That's the armor. And it is right up against the motherboard tray. So I suspect it's the armor that's giving us that resistance on the edges. And if that's the case, that's normal and fine. Normally, the motherboard's going to sit flat when the screws go in. It stays flat. It doesn't start warping on the edges. And at the same time, it doesn't look warped. The board looks straight to me. When I look at the edge of it, it looks completely flat. So it's almost like the screws were unwarping the board. But it is a very minor warp, and it may be very difficult to see without some kind of a measuring tool. But I'll tell you, that edge, the seam looks even from top to bottom. I think the board is straight. Now, boards are meant to warp. It's the way they make them now. Not that we want the warp, because it's not aesthetically pleasing, but it should have no impact on anything regarding performance or cooling or reliability. Okay, let's see what's going on in the chat room here. Our friend Buster is checking out for the night. It's getting late over there in Scotland. Good to see you, Buster. Thanks for hanging out with us, my friend. I see Frankie B's joined us and William Denton. Welcome in, guys. Vaso says hello. There's a lot of discussion regarding the proper positioning of hoses. So there is a technical side and there's an aesthetic side. The pumps are designed to run in any orientation, and manufacturers are usually, the manufacturers of the pumps are pretty clear about that in the directions. But don't let the nerds accept that as a possibility. The nerds, and I'm going to say that term lovingly, they're going to look at every way physics and gravity works and air bubbles. There's a fascination with heat and air bubbles with nerds. It is the weirdest thing, and it's not an insult to nerds. It's an observation that makes very little difference in reality, except to those few who might be affected by pump noise. Because this is a completely sealed system, and because we've been building computers for over 30 years, liquid coolers are fairly new in that 30 years, maybe the last 15 years we've been putting them in. And we've never had one come back due to noise or due to having to reposition the pumps. This is almost poisonous or toxic information to people because it's not very practical in most cases. It's like a mechanical hard drive. Mechanical hard drives, or any hard drive, it can be installed flat, upside down, sideways. It doesn't matter to the drive. And people will talk about where the heads are and how they hover over the platters and all this other nonsense. And it's just not, it's technically true, but in practicality, it's such a negligible difference, it's not worth worrying about unless you actually are trying to fix something. But there's a serious sort of technochondria is what I call it. It's hypochondria for technical people, where they're so afraid of catching something, they want to do everything they can to avoid it ever happening, when it probably never would have happened had they just not even thought about it or been aware. And that awareness is then almost like a virus, in that it creates this illusion or delusion of avoiding a problem. So let's say we turn this pump around and we follow what all these enthusiasts talk about, and it works, and we go, oh, good for me, see, I did that right. But if you do it this way, it also works, and you can say, good for me, I did this right. But that's not usually the way the brain works. The brain rewards you for avoiding a problem because you avoided the problem. But where the error in that thinking is you never had the problem, so there was never a problem to avoid. In that case, It's delusion. It's spending money and time on something you didn't need to have no impact whatsoever, and you don't know any better. You don't know any better because you didn't experience the downside of it or the bad side of it. You just told yourself, I avoided it. Well, you'll see when we turn this on, there's no problem with it being mounted upside down, and that's all complete horsepucky. If your pump isn't filled all the way up, and these are all-in-one pumps, they're sealed at the factory, listen, that ain't gonna work well no matter what you do. You can talk about air bubbles all you want, but the fact is, when your car runs out of gas, when your gas tank becomes more air bubble than is fuel, your engine no more. Same is true with the car's radiator. Your car's radiator may not be filled right up to the top. And you got to remember, when liquid heats up, it expands. So there's got to be room for that liquid to expand out, or you can cause damage to the pump and the internals, put too much pressure on the hoses. So a little air in the system is required for that expansion and contraction of fluids to take place. This idea that any air in the system is bad is false. It's just a very poor understanding of liquid dynamics and thermodynamics. But too much air is also bad. But that shouldn't happen unless you have a leak or the fluid that the manufacturer used, something was defective about it. In which case, when you think about how serious these problems are, whether or not the orientation of the radiator is up or down is a very, very minuscule detail to whether or not that pump's going to work. I've heard people say it can create some noise if the air bubbles get in there. But again, if you're having the noise, we'll be happy to help you resolve that, in which case maybe turning the radiator round would make sense. I don't want the look of that. We're not building this so we can get the best cooling possible. We're building this so we can have the best looking and simultaneously best cooling possible. And we're going to sacrifice a little bit of the looks because we can't get rid of the hoses. And we may be sacrificing, and probably not, a little bit of the cooling that would be so negligible no one but some detailed nerd would notice, and they'd only notice it because they're looking for it. If it's not obvious, it's not a problem. If it's something you have to look for to find, I don't agree that that is a helpful way to think or a helpful way to help anybody. So you go your way, I'll go mine, but I am a bit disgusted with the amount of false information online these days. Or the fact that the information is technically accurate, but in practicality makes no real difference in the real world for the vast majority of people, except those who choose to see it. Sometimes people believe in things, and it doesn't matter if there's evidence, or if the evidence is only something that can be shown in a lab. They have a belief or a faith, and you cannot tell them otherwise. They choose to believe a certain content creator. They choose to perpetuate this information when it's not really helping anybody. It's causing some anxiety in new users thinking, oh, this is something I need to worry about. I'm telling you it isn't. If it's something you need to worry about, you'll know when you turn your system on, right? We're going to turn this on. It's going to run fine. And if we're going to have problems with bubbles in the system, we're going to have other problems much bigger than that in the near future. And it won't matter how you orient your pump. That's my opinion. Take it or leave it. Let's see what else we got in the chat room here. Cooling aside, David wants to know, will the hoses get in the way of a GPU here? Hey, that's a fair question. I hadn't thought of that because I wasn't considering a GPU in here. But if in fact somebody wants to put a GPU in here, that is a valid concern, because my instinct is I want to push these hoses down away from the RAM. So if we turn the radiator around and the hoses go up, it may be possible that we can still get them around the RAM, because essentially it's the same distance from the middle of the pump to the bottom of the RAM to the middle to the top. So if we were to flip it around for that reason, then that would clear the path for a large graphics card. On the other hand, we could push the hoses down, but that would make a very tight install for a GPU. Now, when you're dealing with a case this big, it's assumed you're going to want to put a GPU in this. Now, even though I don't, it's quite possible that the future owner of this will. And we could certainly try. Now you've given me a valid thing to think about here. And one of the reasons I only put 4 screws in the radiator was because I wasn't 100% certain that I've got everything right. So I'm not taking out 12 screws, I'm only going to take out 4. Could we flip it around the other way? Would that be a better fit? But for a real practical reason, not an imaginary one? Yes, good point. I had not considered that. That would have been one of those things where it would have been, we got to put a video card in, now we've got a problem, right? Potentially. And we deal with it then. But that is a real practical concern. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm so focused on how this is going to look. I've sort of put the aesthetics, well, not sort of. I have put the aesthetics over the practicality of it because let's face it, RGB RAM is impractical, and having a water block is more or less necessary on a 14900K unless you're going to put a giant air cooler in there, which is going to cover up your RGB RAM, right? So pick a lane. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Now, obviously, when we mount the radiator on top, that wouldn't be a problem. And if we mounted the radiator up front, that wouldn't be a problem. But me going for that aesthetic, this particular look with these fans, is what's created the scenario. There are other reasons why people will mount radiators. Most times, the case only allows you one place that a radiator can fit. And this case gives us 3. So we have 3 different ways we could do this, and they're only decided by a personal preference, right? I just don't like fans on top. Again, I tend to set things on top of the box, and it'll be suffocating the machine, and I won't know it. The machine will just start running hot, and the fans will get loud, and why is that doing that? I mean, I could put stuff here on this side. That'll be fine. But, you know, my motherboard boxes, I keep them on top. And I've made that mistake where I put a motherboard box on top, walked out of the room for 2 hours, came back to an overheating system. It's like, oh my gosh, I just realized what I did. And I knew I was in trouble when I walked back into the room and I could hear the fans just really cranking up. And the computer wasn't benchmarking. There's no reason. I think it was just doing updates. It's like, wow, that's awfully loud. And that's when I realized, you know, my CPU was right up close to 100 degrees Celsius. It might even have hit it. You know, it was already thermal throttling because instead of setting the motherboard box down, I, by habit, put it on top of the case. Since I know that's what I do, I try to avoid putting the radiator there. Now, I thought initially we'd put the radiator up front and we'd get all the RGB then through here because that is pretty sure that's a graded front and that'll give us a diffused RGB through there. But then when I realized we could put the fans right there, poof, I really like that. But I didn't want the hoses getting in the way of the RAM. So that's why I oriented it with the, in other cases where we've put the radiators, we had no choice where the hoses had to go down. So because of those previous experiences, I just say, oh, we'll start with the hoses down so we don't have that problem. But we could try flipping around, see if it works. Frank Jimmy says, welcome to the CareyHolzman Marathon. Is this a record? 7 straight days with a live stream? No, I think I've gone a good 20 days or longer with live streams. When that happens, it's usually between November and January 1st. But it's possible. I've been doing this so long now, I can't tell you how many days in a row I go most. If I've got content to make and I've got the time to do it, then I'm going to keep making videos so long as I have the content and the time to make them. The only time I don't make videos is if there's a customer I have to take care of or personal errands, doctors, dentists, haircuts, whatever. some appointment needs to be met, some meeting has to be had. Otherwise, there's no content to make, and I'll take a day off. But I'm sure a lot of us that work for a living would like to take more days off. I'm kind of in that position, except I'm my boss and I'm cracking the whip all the time. Get back to work, Carey. That's what I tell myself. Now, if the case allowed for a vertical GPU mount, that would solve that problem. But as I mentioned earlier, this case does not. I mean, it's got the holes, but there's no removable plates there. So you have to put the video card in horizontally in a standard way. So yeah, let me just unscrew this right quick. We'll see if we can flip it around. I know in other cases there was a problem with that. One of the reasons that I went this direction is the fact that all of our fan power cables are coming out towards the board, and that's where all the wiring grommets are. If we flip it the other way, all of those cables that are on the fans are going to be over here towards the front of the case, and we don't have really any clean way to wire those back here. There's nowhere to run them, and I think that was also part of the consideration. It does appear from the other side, looking at it from the front, we do have a gap for the cables to fit in right, I don't know if you guys can see it, but right there, right back here, we do have some space where we can run the cables through, and then I think we can get underneath of it, right under there. And that should be pretty darn close to being invisible, but not as invisible as bringing the cables out on this side. However, if that's the price we pay in order to free the hoses up for clearance for the GPU, well then it's not really a decision we have to make. It's already been made for us. So let's try it. I'd rather do that now than after the system's all done and then realize, oh, I gotta undo it. But that's the benefit of building your own, right? You don't have these restrictions. You can always take it all back apart if you want to, or if you need to. It's not a problem for me, but it might be a problem for somebody. And that somebody could be me should I decide to put a big graphics card in it. So yeah, let's just try and think ahead and handle that now. And I guess I'm going to start by taking out 2 of these screws. I was so happy I got it seated, you know. Well, don't be too happy. Take that confidence down a notch. Just when you thought you had it figured out. All right, let's see, how do I want to do this? I think I want to go this way. Trying to visualize this in my head. Like this isn't going to work. I can't tell you why. Hopefully I'm visualizing it incorrectly here. Let's see. Looks like it's happy either way. There's one. Let's slide this back in here. That one screw holding us in. Now see, what's happened is I've raised it too high and this won't close anymore. So that's okay. It just means we have to loosen this screw a little bit. And it'll still hold the radiator, but the radiator is going to drop through a little bit there. Something is not letting us through. Let's check our cables. Okay, so what's happening, I had a feeling this wasn't going to work. If you look at where the hoses are, It's maybe more easy for me to just bring it down this way. If you see where the USB panel is here, underneath this panel are all the cables coming up to feed this panel. If this panel was put more towards the center or more, I don't know, just literally anywhere else than it is, the cables coming out are very firmly attached and don't have much flexibility to the circuit board below. And the hoses to the radiator, these hoses, are right up against it. However, I think something just sat down and lowered us. Let me just check again. Now, we're not quite flush, but it's promising. So let's just keep finagling here and see if this will. Oh, you know what? The radiator does sit for, no, it doesn't. No, it's not in the track. Hold on. Hold on a second. Let's do two things. Let's secure the track, and then we'll see if we've got clearance for those hoses. The fact that it even went in is promising, because it didn't look like it wanted to go first, but it wasn't seated correctly. So we've got just the one screw holding the radiator in, and we just need to raise the radiator up. See, and I can't get it to move without hitting the wires underneath this. So maybe I can get it, push hard enough. Oh, it's making me cringe. Can I get that to seat? No. And here's why. Remember those hooks I bent? You can see them. Right here's one hook, right here's one hook. I can't get the radiator up high enough to go where these hooks were blocking it. So we're still stuck with the original hooks. Remember I said I could move either these front ones or these bottom ones? Well, I can't get the radiator up high enough without hitting this. And so the hooks that are at the bottom are preventing that radiator from sitting. So that means we can also bend those hooks. I mean, it doesn't appear that we're going to need them. I'm not sure why they're there. I confused myself because I saw the hook coming out of this side, and I thought I had the frame on backwards. But no, the frame is embossed with the Corsair logo, and it does absolutely go on this direction, not flip the other way. And so we're back to the same problem we had initially with those little hooks, because we cannot raise the radiator up anymore like we could before. Maybe with enough brute strength I can push it, force it. But I mean, we are jamming these top cables hard, like they're going to have constant pressure on them. Now, they're not moving, which is a good thing, right? If we put pressure on it and we're moving them, they're going to break. If we just slam this up against there and get this radiator over those hooks, ooh, it just fell. And put some screws in to hold it in place. Then my next question is, will we clear the front for a GPU installation without the hoses getting in the way, and simultaneously please the people that believe that, you know, the bubbles in the system or whatever are going to have some impact on the position of the hoses, which, you know, I've already talked about why that's not really a problem unless you actually have that problem. That's a sign of worse things to come, is all I'm saying. I do feel like that hook is still in the way. I wonder if I can push the hook in with the radiator. What if I just use the radiator? Oh, that worked. Just push the radiator and then the hooks just popped out. Now, now that's way better. Now I'm not pushing so hard up against the bottom of this connector. And I'm flush against the frame. Oh, look at that. So this whole time, my frustration were these hooks. And I don't know why they're there. I really have no idea. It might be explained in the documentation. I guess we'll never know. All right, so we'll put the 4 screws back in. Again, I'm still not certain. I'm not 100% confident that we're still done with this radiator positioning, but let's take a look now and see if that makes it any better. Oh yeah, these hoses are much clearer. However, I don't want to block the RAM. But that's okay. I mean, it doesn't look like it's blocking it any more than it was before. Again, all of these cables now have to move to the other side and come around the long way, but I think they're still going to be hidden either way. Yeah, great tip. I don't get these hooks. I don't get that at all. It looks like it's there to run your cables, but now I'm getting a feeling that those hooks sticking out are going to prevent the back panel from going on. And if that's true, then not only do I have to bend the hooks back, which we've already done, but then where they're actually hooking, bend them straight up or break them off. Just bend them back and forth until they snap off. And whatever they're supposed to hold in place, if I ever need to do that someday, just use a nylon zip tie. Like, I don't understand why those hooks are there. You see how much further that hook stands right there, where my finger is, versus where that side panel needs to go on. And I think that side panel now isn't going to be flush up against the back here. I think. There's one way to know for sure. Let's see if the side panel will go on. How did this go on before? Oh, I see. It kind of goes in this way first, and then it closes like a door. Oh, we're okay. Yeah, we're fine. It's close, but it's not bowing. It's not pushing against the side. It's gotta be so close. But hey, close is fine. Nothing to fix. We're good. All right. Phew. I'm going to untie this wire tie here for our front port umbilicals. And we've got another one right down here. This is our power switch, reset switch. We got two USB 3s. Nice. And a USB 3.1 right there with a cap on it. That cap can come off. And we'll take this wire tie off. And I think this motherboard accommodates two USB 3s as well. It sure does. Nice. So check this out. Oh, got another wire tie right here. Check this out. Look at that. Get by with a little help from my friends. Let's take this USB-C cable, or sorry, USB 3 cable, and run it right out the grommet. Right there, right through here. Nope, I want to go to the next one down. This one here. And it can plug in to our motherboard. See where the cable is? And you can go right like this. Now, we do have some slack there. We're going to bend that back, and it should look pretty clean. This thing is getting heavy. Okay, back up on the Lazy Susan. We're going to repeat that with a second USB 3 cable. You don't see that too often on the channel. And again, back to the same location, right underneath here. And where is it? There. So we do have some slack that's going to get tied up, and then all these cables that are in front of the fans, those are the fan cables that need to be routed around back or under and back. We'll see how that goes. I'm not putting the rest of those radiator screws in until I get that cabling for the fans sorted, because it may be that we end up having to move the radiator to the top of the front, because if putting it in one direction blocks a GPU install, if putting it in the other direction limits our cable ability to the fans, then this would not be a good location for a radiator. We're going to find that out when we get to it, but let's continue with our USB installs. This is our Type-C connector, and the Type-C on this board is just, oh, we have two of them. Wow, that's pretty cool. just above the USB Type 3 connector here. So I think we can come in there. I guess we could do it either way. We could come into one below. It's getting a little crowded. Bring that in, and either connector will be fine. They're essentially delivering the same service in the same way. So I suppose the downside, this is a very inflexible cable, and it doesn't really look all that pretty right there by the fans, but there's not much we can do about it. This cable, which should be our front port audio cable, and for this cable, we're going to come in right down at the bottom here. There should be some access here. And then the furthest connector here on the left has a pin missing. It's usually on the top row or the bottom row. Figure that out depending on which motherboard you have. This one, our pin is missing on the top row. And that's going to plug in right there, and we'll pull the slack inwards. And then finally, this is our front unified panel connector with power switch, reset switch, power LED, hard drive LED, I think. I don't know if there's a hard drive LED in here. No, there isn't. We have a power switch, a power light, and a reset switch. I can see the connectors are missing, and there's 2 wires missing. There's no hard drive LED activity light on this case. That's kind of a bummer. Don't really use them much these days anyway, but still nice to have. And usually it's labeled F panel or front panel on the front of your case. At the very bottom right, which should be that connector right there. Okay. So far, I mean, cable management wise, it's pretty straightforward. Just got to deal with those fan cables on the front. And now for us to test this out, we just need a power supply. Now, as I mentioned, I bought some returned ASUS 1000 watt modular power supplies. They're about $20, $20 to $30. Let's call it $25 cheaper. So instead of $155, it was like $130. I thought, you know what? That's a pretty good price for a 1000 watt, 80 plus gold certified modular power supply. So I bought a couple, and I've never reviewed ASUS power supplies before. And the whole catalyst for this was because of the Z390 build, the ProArt Creator Wi-Fi that we also have to put into a case like this. We'll either get to that, if not tomorrow, then next week. We also have that Samsung Galaxy Book 4 Edge. It's supposed to arrive sometime today, and we'll review that next week as well. So content every day, because every day there's more content. We'll probably be broadcasting on the weekend too, right up until about the holiday, and then everything will slow down. All right, now what do I do with my power supply? I think I have one right here. Oh yeah, this is it. Oh, it's heavy. Okay, let's bring it over here. This is clearly a returned item. Somebody has opened this. The 2 previous ones I ordered looked brand new. I was so happy with their condition, I ordered 2 more, and they weren't available anymore. So this was like the next best thing, and I think it was the seller changed, where I was getting it from Amazon warehouse. Or was it the condition? One said like, the 2 I ordered were like new. And there had like 18 available, and I told you guys about it. And then I got them in the mail. I got them in the mail. I told you guys about how these are just basically new. Decided I should order 2 more at that price. And after I told you guys, I think because I told you guys about it, y'all got a good deal. Somebody did, because they weren't available anymore. And this was the like next closest thing, you know, according to Amazon's recommendation. I'm sure it's fine. The box is a little beat up, and it's got some tape on it that clearly isn't the factory tape. I cut the tape, and in the inside, power supply is not wrapped at all in a bag. There's no styrofoam in here or packing, so clearly somebody returned this. Everybody always leaves the plastic on. The bag has been opened. I don't know if we're missing any cables there. But the power supply otherwise is in great shape. It looks like brand new. We get some Velcro cable ties. A little bit of information. Certificate of reliability. I guess that's a very reliable certificate. We have an instruction book. And it looks like we have a Go Faster sticker for ASUS. Finally, there is some desiccant in here. And that's it for that. So, did I make an error in judgment when buying this power supply to save 30 bucks? Or would I have been better off paying the 30 bucks and getting a brand new unit? Either way, the warranty from ASUS is the same as new. So our factory warranty remains unchanged. However, what it would cost us to mail this back, no, I don't hear anything shaking around in there, may defeat whatever price we saved in ordering it used. So we want to know if it's good or bad within the free return period of Amazon for that reason. But should it fail prematurely while in warranty, it'd be no different than if it failed when it was, you know, say you bought it new and you had a failure. Same thing. You know, I don't think there's any screws in here. Usually the power supplies come with screws, unless they're in this bag. It's, wait a minute, what's this? SATA cables. So, somebody was confused. Free set of SATA cables. I'll set that right where I'm going to use them next. Boy, I don't see a power cable either. Let's see. These are really nice braided cables, though. They kind of seem thin and really flexible. Let's see. SATA power. This, obviously, somebody did not put this back right. And it's got a nylon zip tie at the end. Wow. You know, somebody put nylon zip ties on this. It wouldn't normally come with those. And then they paired these two together with a nylon zip tie, which should not be there. And the reason it shouldn't be there is it could get in the way. We don't know where the spacing... If we were to put a GPU in this, we don't know what kind of connector the GPU will take. As such, by putting them together like this, they may be too close for us to plug in. That's something that you would do after. So clearly somebody returned this that did in fact use it. Now that's a little concerning to me because why did they return it? Now I'm going to suspect the main reason people return things is they ordered something by mistake or they didn't know what they were doing when they installed it. It's possible that after they built their computer, and just to give you an example of my imagination on this, they started getting blue screens and they said, well, try this and try that. And they, oh, try your power supply. And that's maybe why it came back. And then why they included the SATA cables just kind of gives me the idea that they were probably not knowing what they were doing. Okay, this is another GPU power cable. This is factory tied. You can tell they never use this cable. That's a SATA cable. What else? Another cable they never... You can tell how neatly they're wrapped that they've never been unwrapped. This is an ATX 3.0 power cable, which may negate the need for the other ones. Usually your GPU will use one or the other, or several of one and one of the other. That's never been used. It's factory wrapped. This one no longer has a zip tie, so whatever this is, they apparently used... Oh, it's the motherboard cable. What are the odds? They just shoved it back in the bag. Hey, I'm okay with this so far. But what I'm still not seeing is the power cable to go from the wall to the power supply. Now, I've told you, I've got dozens and dozens of those. But it's more of an observation, like, isn't that interesting? This does have what appear to be two CPU power cables. And again, whoever used this, used them both because they're two separate cables that have not been wire tied back together. So it looks like they used basically two cables, one cable for their graphics card, whoever this was, the motherboard power and CPU power. They threw their SATA cables in because they didn't realize that goes with their board. The person that checked it in on Amazon didn't know either, and nobody thought to give us the power cable. So again, we could simply return this back to Amazon and say, this is an incomplete item. But honestly, I have so many of those power cables, I don't care about that. As long as we're not missing any of the SATA cables or any of our GPU cables. Oh, and it looks like they used one of the SATA cables too, probably for a fan controller. And then, yeah, and this is for our GPU again. So I'm not using any of these, but somebody might need them. And I don't think anything's missing. I think everything, as far as the power supply cables go, we're good. That's the important thing. But we didn't get screws for the power supply. We didn't get power for the power supply. And we got SATA cables that have nothing to do with the power supply. Deal? I think we're close enough. I want to reiterate, Amazon allows for free 30-day returns, no questions asked. Just could be because you changed your mind. During the holiday season, Amazon typically extends their returns 30 days after the holidays. So if you're buying something now, it's presumed you may be giving that as a gift. And that person receiving that gift will not get it till the end of the month. And so Amazon will say, we'll give you 30 days to return your gift, which takes us to the last day of January. So we have a lot of time to return this if we want to. We also are missing the styrofoam packing material, but there's really nothing that can break in these power supplies as far as that styrofoam is kind of a waste. Maybe it's good when it's shipping from overseas via cargo ship, but once it's here in the US, getting it from the distribution center to the house, at least for me anyway, it's just not necessary. And David Graham says, there's your 30 bucks worth. Interesting, isn't it? But power supply screws and power supply cables are all universal. The same screws that work on one power supply work on another. The same power cable that works on a power supply works on others. That's at least standard stuff. SATA cables, I have lots of those. I didn't need any more. And those screws, I got lots of those screws. So no problem there either. In this scenario, I think it's okay. It should not have been that way. We should have gotten everything. And oftentimes Amazon will list it at a cheaper price if they realize it's not 100% like new. When Amazon is, well, and it's true of other sellers, but you can't really believe other sellers. When Amazon Warehouse says something is like new or in used condition, that's how the price is dictated or the discount is dictated. If it's like new, it's not as big of a discount. But what does it mean when it says, you know, it's anything other than like new? And they have that disclaimer, you know, some instructions may be missing, some packing material may be missing. They don't really commit one way or the other, but they do tell you you can return it for 30 days for free as an Amazon Prime member. So if you don't want to take that risk, you know, spend the extra 30 bucks. But as far as ASUS is concerned, this power supply is under their full warranty, which I think is 10 years. You don't have to tell ASUS, I bought it as a returned item. No. They may want a copy of the receipt. You send them a copy of the receipt. So that's it. It has nothing to do with whether you're buying a returned item or not. And if you don't bring it up, they won't ask. And it shouldn't have any effect one way or the other. It's just useless information. So I wouldn't volunteer it just in case it could create some confusion from the employee you're working with, who might falsely believe that that has some impact when it doesn't. And then that just delays and adds to your frustration of trying to get your power supply replaced. So as far as you're concerned, or at least when you're talking to the companies that you buy used equipment from Amazon, as far as those companies are concerned, that's brand new and under warranty, and there's no reason for them to use that as some excuse to get out of their warranty. So don't bring it up. Don't tempt it. Now we want this fan, because this fan draws air in. We want it to face the back of that, the back of this case, because we have a mesh panel here that's going to allow the airflow. We don't want to turn it this way. Turning it this way towards the board is going to draw hot air in and restrict air intake because there's no vents over here. It's just going to use the atmosphere inside the case. So we're going to orient this way. I think this little logo lights up, but we'll never see it. Normally a power supply would go in this way and you'd see that logo if your power supply shroud has a cutout for it. Otherwise, in a dual chambered case, if that logo lights up, it's not doing it for any particular reason that we'll appreciate, because we'll never see it. Okay, so on the back, the reset on-off is pretty recessed in there. Is that normal, or is that switch pressed in? I'm going to assume that's normal. Everything else looks good. Nothing's rattling. I think somebody didn't know what they were doing. There's a pro and a con to doing it yourself. And where the con may be is that they're sending things back and having to do things 2 or 3 times because they're figuring it out. And they're guessing what's wrong, and they're just part swapping until they get it right. The pro of that is that we get discounts on parts that are just perfectly fine, presuming they send everything back. Now, with regards to the case screws, there may even be some included with this case. Usually they are. And we don't usually use the ones that come with the case. We usually use the ones that come with the power supply. Even though they're the exact same screw in most scenarios, it's just the way I like to keep things organized. But let me put my glasses on. Let's take a quick look in here. We've already exceeded 2 hours today. That went by quick. Washers. Oh no, they did not give us power supplies. Wait, unless they're in here. Well, that's the first time in a long time that a case manufacturer has not included screws for a power supply. But they're a very, very common screw. In fact, I think I have a bag of them right here out of a power supply we used that we didn't need the screws for because we reused the screws from one of the machines we upgraded. We took the original power supply out, replaced it with a newer power supply. And so the original power supply, these are either the screws that came with the original power supply or the replacement on that upgrade we did last week. I'm already using them. Okay. The exact same screw. Nothing's any different. Didn't know I was going to be needing them so soon, but there you go. Now we're going to put the power supply in right here. Again, there's no removable frame for this, so we're going to have to just hold it in place. Now, because we know the motherboard works, I am assuming the likelihood that this power supply was replaced was because somebody was having problems, and it's a very common brainless thing to say, try changing your power supply. But very rarely does a power supply arrive with problems like a brand new one. Now, if they had spilled something in it or they dropped it, we would see damage, and we don't see any damage to it. And if the power supply starts causing us blue screens or weird errors that we start getting, I should say, if after we use this power supply and we fire the machine up and we're getting weird behavior out of the machine, our suspect will be this power supply. I suspect we're not going to have any problems with this at all. If problems creep up in 6 months or 6 years, we just deal with ASUS on the warranty. No differently than if you bought it brand new. It'd still be the same outcome for you. So that's what I'm predicting. But again, I may be overly optimistic here. Let's get this straightened out. Okay, so the two ends go to the back of the power supply. And they only fit into one place back here. You cannot get it wrong. And I realize you're not seeing anything right now, but there's no other way for me to do this, unfortunately. These dual chambered cases kind of tie my hands with showing you one side or the other. Okay, so that is what it looks like right now with the power supply cables. That's to the main board. And then what we can do is just bring that up through this grommet right up here, right up at the top. You guys can see. Right there, you see the cable? And we'll bring that, turn it a little bit like so. Now these fan cables are really getting in the way. Okay, that's on. Now we have the two EPS power connectors. Now previously I'd only been hooking up one. I said the other one is only necessary if you're overclocking. But hey, maybe the person who buys this wants to overclock it. It doesn't hurt you to have both. It's just that the power supply I was using didn't offer both. I specifically looked to make sure that these CPU power connectors on this power supply, that it included two of them. Sometimes it's not real clear in the documentation or even in YouTube reviews. They may go over the cables quite quickly. I think it's important when somebody's doing a review on a power supply that they indicate if it's got the two cables, because it's becoming more and more common now, especially on the higher end motherboards, but even on mid-range boards. We still don't need them personally, but you know, somebody might. Now those connectors are typically located back here on most boards, but they're over here on this board. So we're going to come in from this wire grommet right up here at the top. And that says CPU, and it doesn't matter which one we plug where. They're both the same. There's one. And here's the other one. Now this is going to need some wire ties because all these cables are quite loose. The benefit of them shipping to you loose like that is so that you can have more flexibility with them. And now these ends, this says PSU on this end. The ends look similar, but one end splits in half for different board configurations, and one end is solid. And it'll tell you usually on the connector which end goes to the back of the power supply, which end goes to the motherboard or the CPU in this case. Or it'll say PCIe because that looks just like a CPU power connector, except it splits between 6 and 8 instead of 4 and 4 on one end, and it's solid like this on the other end. That can get confusing for first-time builders. If you don't buy a modular power supply, well, this is a problem you're never going to have. There's only one end you have to play with, and it's always going to be the correct end. Let me take a flashlight here to see where this is going to go. So it looks like we have a PCIe connector. This is our ATX 3.0. And these are all CPU PCIe right here. There's no way this is going to look good. It's one or the other, I suppose. So we'll put one here to try and hide it. And we'll put this one above it. This can go. I would put it down here, and I'll tell you why. We have two more PCIe connectors. Okay, one here and one here. That could go to a graphics card, or we have the ATX3 connector, which would go to the graphics card. And these are going to be easier to access later on than if I put this cable above it and I have to work around behind it. So I'm just thinking of, you know, feature access. And that's assuming we have a good power supply, that I'm not doing this all for nothing. We hook it all up and nothing happens. With that, I think we can just plug it in and turn it on. Can't we? I think we can. Pretty sure. I mean, aside from the ugly cabling coming off these fans on the front, I think it'll work. Let's find out. Power supply switch is in the off position. Plug power in. I need HDMI and Ethernet since we already have Windows installed yesterday. All the extra power cables are going to go in the motherboard box as they normally would. This is our Type C USB 4/Thunderbolt 3.4 345 to HDMI adapter, because this motherboard has no HDMI output on it, even though our GPU does have internal graphics. Again, at this caliber, I think the board manufacturers are assuming that you would put a GPU in here. Go up here. Oh, keyboard and a mouse, we're gonna need that. So here's my mouse dongle. You know what, let's plug it up here just to see if these are working up here. It's a good way to test. Turn that on, turn this on, and then finally, let me grab Ethernet cable right here. Okay, we'll plug that in. We have a 2.5 gig Ethernet jacks on the back of this board. And with that, if I hit this, no, turn the power supply switch on first, Carey, and then hit this button, it's lighting up. Pretty good for a bad power supply somebody returned so far. And let's jump over to camera 2, see if we're outputting anything. I'm going to say that's working. A little bit of cable cleanup, but overall, very easy. Now, the power supply fan is not turning. However, this is likely one of those power supplies where the fan only turns when the power supply works hard enough that it needs to turn. Some power supplies have a switch to enable or disable this feature. But when you reach a certain point, it may be, of power and money when it comes to buying your power supply, that this is a feature that they no longer offer you this option of turning it off, that you will want it to only run when necessary. So let me go back to camera 1 here, and I don't know how much I can spin this around while it's plugged in. Move the keyboard again. But if we spin this around this way, you see that power supply fan is not spinning. It's quite possible that the assumption was my power supply is broken because the fan's not spinning, and yet this documentation might specify, and there may have been a sticker on the power supply that said, don't call us for support if your fan is not spinning. If that's the case, then what that means is potentially someone tore the sticker off without reading it, saw the fan wasn't turning, in addition to maybe having some system problems. Maybe they weren't, maybe just the fan not turning. Something's wrong with my power supply. They returned it. They didn't return it back exactly the way they bought it. We already discussed things that were different or missing. They do show another optional button on the back of the power supply, but I don't think we have it. No. So the diagram shows there's a potential button right there for what we would call hybrid mode, which would turn the fan on or off, just like a GPU would do, right? If his GPU fans weren't turning, would he think his GPU was broken? I suspect because we're just idling, this is a 1,000-watt power supply, it's just not getting hot enough for that fan to come on. So if we try running a benchmark, let's run Cinebench on this. Let's see also what our CPU cooling is like with this cooler, and make sure the cooler is installed and is adequate for the CPU. So we're going to jump back over to camera 2 here for a moment. And we're going to go full screen for me. I need my flash drive with my utilities on it. And it does appear our front USB is working because the mouse is moving, right? That's another easy test. In fact, I will plug my flash drive up here into another USB up on top. Just make sure that that second set is working. Yep, it works fine. I'm going to go here. Oh, wrong mouse. Wrong mouse, Carey. I'm going to go over here. And we're going to go to our USB drive. And we'll copy over Uncle Carey's Windows 10 optimizer. We're going to be installing VLC on this later. Under PC testing software, which is back here. We want HWI for our monitoring. And yeah, we'll grab Crystal Disk Mark just to see our performance whoops, just to see that our Gen 4 drive is running where it should be. CPU-Z, we can just verify all of our specs, and then Cinebench R23 is a big one. We'll just copy that over here. It should happen pretty quickly on a USB 3 with a USB 3 flash drive and port. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's good. And then we'll come down here and right over, oops, right here, you eject that. You don't have to eject flash drives anymore, by the way. I sometimes do, sometimes I don't. Depends on my mood. Okay, now, where do we want to start? Hardware info. Oh, they have it for ARM. That's interesting. Okay, 64. That's the one I want. Let's see where our temps are right now. Just under normal idle circumstances, maybe even just browsing the web. Normal everyday use, where are we at? $26, $28, wow, $25? That's really, really cool. Chilly. Look at all those cores we have. This is a monster, and look at, I mean, I'd say just chill out, but it's pretty chilled. It's no wonder that power supply fan isn't even needing to turn. 1,000-watt power supply, we're probably only using 70 watts. All right, so let's go to Cinebench, and let's put this thing to work. Now, not only causes more power from the CPU, it draws more power from the power supply. That should cause things to heat up, and that gives us a better measure of our liquid cooler, and to see if our power supply fan kicks on, if that's even enough to do it. Once I hit start here, we're going to see the heat jump up here in the first 90 seconds. And this is our minimum temp, and this is our maximum. So far, we've hit about 73 already. I'm going to move this over to the right. I hear the fans on the radiator starting to get a little louder as they're starting to have to move more air to cool the liquid in the radiator. And I'm going to spin this around, and no, the power supply fan is still not running. But I'm going to just take a look at it, face it towards me, and see what happens. Now, as far as our temps go, we're still doing really, really good on this. I mean, we're looking at almost a minute in, and the highest temp we've seen so far is about 78. I'm impressed. Now, is the power supply fan not running because the power supply is not getting hot? Well, I'm touching the power supply, and it's colder than the room I'm in. So it's clearly not even getting warm. Not yet, anyway. So we'll let the test continue to run. And while that runs, let me jump back over here. And let's put camera 1 back up, and we'll move camera 1. Yeah, you can start hearing those fans crank up. We're going to move camera 1 over here, maybe down here, so I'm not too much in the way. And then I'm going to keep an eye on this fan. I feel like I should put a little playing card in it so I can hear it if it turns on. But I'll watch for it. But I'm telling you, this power supply, it's a little warm at the back towards the motherboard tray, unless that's heat coming off the motherboard tray because we're right behind the CPU. Well, not right behind it. We're just off to the side and down a little bit. But I think that's coming from the motherboard, not from the power supply. This thing is ice cold. So let it run. I have a feeling that fan is fine, and it will kick on only when it's necessary. Otherwise, I'll be putting it back in the box and sending it back to Amazon. Because that's the last test. Let me look in the chat and see what you guys have to say. Andy Kane said his power supply is like that. The fan only turns on when it gets warm. Most power supplies have a switch called hybrid or eco, and people are like, what does that do? And that's what it does. This one has no switch, so I'm assuming it just does it whether you like it or not. I was going to look at the documentation and see if it mentions it, because they don't want this coming back for a support call. They don't want it returned for that reason. And even when they tell you this is normal, people don't read it. Some people do, but a lot of people just never see it. even when they got a sticker that you have to remove to plug it in, that warns you, they don't read the sticker. It's just an obstacle in the way of them plugging it in. They're too anxious to get their machine up and running. Or the fan doesn't work. I don't know yet. Let's see what it says. Safety information. It's all written in Chinese here. French, Italian, Norse, Polski, Svenska. Okay, well, our documentation is this is the contents, right? Page 3 is English, page 6 is Chinese. So we have 3 pages of directions here. Does it say anything about the fan? Fan is still not turning. I think these instructions are thrown into several models of power supply. It is not specific to that one. But let's see, what does this piece of paper say? The one I also didn't read is about hooking up your graphics card properly. Nothing about the fan here. And then this certificate of reliability, I think, is also just thrown into all power supplies they make, talking about the capacitor, shock testing, moisture resistance, salt spray testing, solder bath test, vibration test, etc., etc. Normally, if they're going to have a fan that doesn't turn, they'll have some documentation that tells you don't call support if your fan doesn't turn. Was that just not included with this power supply? Or, in other words, did the person who returned it throw that away? Was it never there? Or was it never supposed to be there because the power supply is supposed to, the fan is supposed to turn? That's yet to be determined at this point. The fans are still pretty loud comparatively speaking to how quiet they were before. I didn't even realize they were on. And I can't see what our current temps are. So let me just take a minute to jump back over here and see where we're at. 80 degrees Celsius is as bad as it's gotten. And look how fast it's rendering on integrated graphics, ladies and gentlemen. That is impressive. I'm telling you, EKWB makes some great all-in-ones, and if you can still find them for sale, even without the warranty, they did not go out of business because they made bad products. They went out of business because the leadership was using their company's funds as though it were a personal piggy bank with no accountability. And they got away with it for a while, but that's just not something you can sustain, and it caught up with them. And there's in some legal hot water, a couple of people, because it's illegal. But nonetheless, not our problem. We could save some money and get one of these at a discounted price while they're still available. They work. They're one of the best coolers, liquid all-in-one coolers I've ever used, as far as how effective are they. They're not the best looking, but they're very easy to install. And I don't have a lot of experience. I think this is our 3rd or 4th one we've installed, but they're... Oh, wait. Power supply fan just started to spin just now. It just kicked on. There it is. Yep. How much you want to bet? Somebody didn't know what they were doing. And that saves us money. That's the downside of selling to consumers. It's one of the reasons I don't sell components to people. We have no idea how the post office is going to handle that, and we have no idea what the capabilities of the person we're selling to are. If it's a complete stranger on eBay, they could try swapping their bad one for the new one they bought from you and tell you their bad one is the one you sent them. And then which side do you think eBay and PayPal are going to take? It's not good for the seller. When you sell to trusted individuals and friends, or you're giving it to friends or trusted individuals, it's very different than being accused of scamming them when they're the ones scamming you, or they had no idea what they were doing and they broke it, but they insist what you sold them was broken out of the box. It's a bad place to be to make a few bucks on eBay. Plus eBay's making their profit, PayPal's making their profit, the shipping service is making their profit. The buyer is saving money, and you as a seller are paying for all of that. So you're almost better off giving it away or giving it to a friend or a family member than going through the risks involved in selling online to complete strangers. Yeah, that power supply fan is on now. It's working. There's no way to turn that feature off. I'm good with it. That's a feature that you shouldn't be able to turn off anyway. Why would you want your fan to run if it's unnecessary? You know, if the machine's not running hot, there's no reason to run the fan. And when the fan does its job and the machine cools down, fan turns off. I'd expect nothing less. All right, let me look over into the chat room here. Dave Price says, check out what Google is calling Willow. You're talking about their qubit processing quantum CPU? Is that what you're referring to? We don't deal with any of that, so it's a whole nother division of computers that maybe someday will trickle down to consumers, but it isn't for consumers. I think we're good with the power supply. I think I'm happy with what I paid and what I got. I don't care about the screws. I don't care about the power cable. I do care about the modular cables. That's not negotiable. I don't care about the packing. That's all going in the trash anyway. And I have the full warranty. Pretty sure, someone can check that over on Amazon, but I'm pretty sure that's a 10-year warranty. So that power supply should easily last the life of the computer. And if it doesn't, apart from your cost of sending it to the ASUS, the sending it back and the replacement is, ASUS covers that cost. You just have to get it to them. Vaso says he ordered the Thermaltake Tough Power GF3 ARGB 850 watt. ARGB. They have a power supply that has ARGB. We'd never see that on a case like this. Oh, and my fan stopped. So now the power supply fan has completely stopped. And you can hear the fans on the radiator have slowed down. That must mean our test is over, right? Because everything got quiet. I like hearing the fans when the system's working. Otherwise, how do I know that I'm getting full performance out of my systems? If those fans are getting louder temporarily while I'm processing something intense, that reassures me it's working. If the fans are loud all the time regardless, something's wrong. And if the fans are quiet all the time, no matter how much I throw at it, then we're not getting the best cooling we could be if those fans would crank up. So our max temp on first test was just 80 degrees Celsius. That's insane. Those are fantastic Cinebench numbers. We're going to do the single core test, and I'm going to start that. Sorry, I was looking over here at our temps, our maximum temps across all of our cores. Look at all those cores. Woo, 24 of them bad boys. Now, let's jump back over here to our single core test. We'll start that up and bring our hardware info back up again so we can watch the first 60, 90 seconds of this is when it's going to reach maximum temps, and we'll see if it gets any hotter than this. And then we'll probably also see that power supply fan start to kick on. I'll leave it faced this way so you guys can watch when that happens. In the meantime, we'll also hear those fans crank back up as the system starts working hard. And that reassures me, it gives me warm fuzzies. It's doing exactly what I'm telling it to do. And it's only cooling as necessary, both for the power supply and for the radiator fans. That's how it's supposed to work. Paul Gray with a $10 Australian Super Chat. Hey, thank you, Paul, as always, and for your regular contributions, and your generosity is very appreciated. In fact, while we're waiting, I should check my phone. I haven't done that the whole broadcast. We're almost an extra hour into this one, so we'll see if we can't wrap it up here shortly. If you have questions, this is the time to ask. I have an Amazon order that is on its way. And it doesn't look like I missed anything from any of you, assuming my email's updating correctly. So I think we're caught up. Oops. Okay. Everything's nice and quiet, including our system. And how has our test been doing? Well, I've not been paying attention. Full screen for Carey. 80 is still our maximum. I think that's all we're going to see. So when I tell you these EK water block all-in-one coolers are excellent for actually cooling, they're not the best looking, but their install is easy. Their pricing, like I would have easily paid $50 more for this. Pricing is very aggressive. Normally EKWB is known for putting together your own custom cooler, right? You buy your water block, you buy your reservoir, you could buy your fluid and dyes and all this other stuff with ridiculous nonsense. And you can spend $1,000 on EKWB to put your own system together, your own block and your own flow indicator, and your own hoses, reservoirs, pumps, it adds up. You can really appreciate what you're getting for the money if you've ever installed one of the lesser known brands that are cheap. Like I'm going to name Arctic. Those can be a real hassle to install. And they work okay. You know, they're not great at cooling. They're not great aesthetically, but they're also not terrible. And they're priced so inexpensively, how can you say no? Until you try to install it. And then you'll be like, maybe I could have done better. This was very easy to install. It also cools better than any other liquid cooler I've ever used that's a closed loop cooler like this. An all-in-one is what we call it. It's not the best looking, but it was priced a little over, let's see, it was a 360-degree cooler. I think it was $140, maybe less. It was very, very inexpensive. And this is before all of the issues with EKWB came to light. Now they're probably clearanced out, right? Because companies got a bad reputation, but not for the products they make. They got a bad reputation to vendors, employees, and anybody they owed money to. What a shame. That's where it reminds me of TeamViewer, a company that makes a great product and has terrible people or terrible policies running the company. That's why I don't use their products. I had the problem with my Mini Cooper, where I had no problem with the car, I had a problem with the dealership, and there was only one dealer in the state at that time. I never traded a car in before because the dealer was bad. I've always had options to go to other dealers. That's the very first and only time I've ever gotten rid of a car, because the only dealership, and there was only one, knew they had no competition and they were just getting away with whatever they wanted to get away with, and I wasn't going to be treated that way. So I got rid of the car because of that lack of options for dealers. Great car though. Terrible people. Terrible policies. Not everybody that worked there was terrible, but the people that were making the decisions, the leadership, bad leadership. EKWB, good employees, good engineers, bad leadership. TeamViewer, great product, terrible leadership. So EKWB doesn't stand alone with this problem, but it's sad. Obviously, you want to have a great product and great leadership, and that's what leads to, companies that we regularly use, whether we're talking about Samsung Android phones or televisions. They generally make a very good product at a very aggressive price point, and generally, stand behind customer service. There's always exceptions, right? But it's not like the head of Samsung just emptied out the bank accounts for his own personal gain and left everybody without a company and employees without a place to work, and all their investors and vendors didn't get paid. That's a pretty nasty thing to do when you're supposed to be a professional. Leadership at Apple was pretty terrible. Steve Jobs had it under control. They kicked him out. As a result, the company then almost filed for bankruptcy, and as a last-ditch effort, brought Steve Jobs back as a, what have we got to lose, right? Doesn't matter anymore. So let's put this terrible guy back in place because, you know, then we can shift the blame away from us. And what does he do? Turns the company around. So what changed at Apple besides Steve Jobs? Whatever Steve Jobs changed. Because if Steve Jobs hadn't stepped back in, if they hadn't have asked him back as a last-ditch Hail Mary, which they honestly didn't think he was going to do anything, that's why they got rid of him to begin with, this is where leadership fails their customers and their investors. Okay, temps have been, yeah, they're solid. We got 2.5 minutes left. We're not going to see higher temps than that. That's really impressive. Now, I still haven't tested this RAM. I haven't done the Crystal Disk Mark test, but I think, you know, given that we're going on 3 hours, we're just out of time once again. What I will do off camera, I'm going to run Crystal Disk Mark. I'm going to put the panels back on. I'm going to do some cable management, and then perhaps we'll bring it back one more time as a final showpiece, unless there's any objections to that, because the more we keep working on this, we can't work on the next one. And we've got so much more to show you. I'm really, really looking forward to demonstrating the Samsung Galaxy Book Edge, as well as finishing off our ASUS ProCreator Z890, to name just two off the top of my head. So again, if we have enough interest from the audience that says, wait, please leave it as is and finish it on another, we'll find the time to do that. If that's what more than one of you wants, you need to let me know in the comments section. Don't tell me privately. Don't tell me in the live chat. Leave it in the comments, and if there's a clear number of people that want that, we'll give you what you want. Otherwise, if this is all just boilerplate cable management and putting panels back on, there's really nothing to see. It's all sort of the same. I will also be putting, I have a couple of spare Noctua 140 millimeter fans. I'll put one back here. That's it. I won't add any more fans. If somebody were to add a GPU to this, you probably want to add fans to the front. But other than that, you know, they can, the power supply, the case, everything's good to go for any GPU you want to put it in. Did something arrive?
Yes,
Is it a laptop?
probably.
It's not a case, is it? You'll know the difference. Oh, that's a laptop. Well, guess, speak of the devil, the Galaxy Edge 4 just arrived. Why is the package opened on the side?
I don't know.
Can I see that?
Yes.
Thank you. This came from Micro Center. It's sealed. The tape has not been broken, but the flap on the box is sticking out.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I'm going to put that back. Weird. This has an address label to Micro Center on one side of the box and an address label here on the other side of the box. I don't know why they just didn't stick the address label of one over the other instead of having two.
Can we take it back?
I'm going to set it down here because it's going to need to get charged up.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, it's a $799 laptop. Micro Center had it for $599, brand new, not returned. And it's the Snapdragon. And again, the Snapdragon is a very different processor from a typical Intel or AMD processor you're used to. Excuse me. But this runs what's called it's called an ARM-based processor. And as a result, it needs coding specifically for it. It doesn't use the coding that Intel and AMD processors use. So things have to be rewritten or translated for this to work. Not everything's going to work on this. As long as my remote software works on it, I'm good. Some applications, I mentioned how the HW Info had an ARM version. That's because the other two versions will not work on a Snapdragon processor any more than they would work on a Mac or they would work on a Chromebook. It's just not going to happen. So the program has to be rewritten Small programs like CPU-Z probably aren't that hard to rewrite, but a big complicated program like Acronis, that would probably cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to recode that. So, you know, Acronis isn't going to work on there. If they gain in popularity, they being ARM processors on a Windows platform, then it would be in all companies' best interest to make an ARM version of their software. But that's yet to be determined. This may be a flash in the pan. This may be a collector's item. It's a first generation product, and we'll see what ends up happening. But as long as it can even so much as emulate what I need to remote access, I should have a good all-day battery life out of it, and that's really what I'm in it for. Paul Gray says it looks good. Yeah, we got to get those cables away from the radiator there and those fans and move them around behind. And we've got lots of room for that back here. It should be really easy to do cable management on this, for sure. And then the Velcro ties and these documents, the stickers, that will go in the motherboard box along with all the other spare components, including the screws we haven't used here for the cooler. And what were these screws for? Oh, we haven't finished putting the radiator in, right? We still have 10 more, no, 8. There's 12 screws total. We put in 4. We have 8 more to go. Are you taking a picture of that?
Yeah, that looks really, really, really good.
Oh, wait till you see it with the glass panel on it. Can I put the glass panel on?
But not until I, no.
No?
Let me take a picture first.
Because the glass panel, because it's smoked, you're not going to see it.
Okay,
You're not going to see the cables as much. Like, let's say I didn't cable manage this. I just threw the covers on it. It's not going to look bad. Check this out. Just as an example of visualizing what this is going to look like. Now, I'm not done yet. Hold on. Let me go full screen over here on camera 1 so everybody at home can see this really, really well. We still have plastic that has to come off. And once we take that plastic off, the dullness will go away. But does that mean I disappear? So all those cables, I'm going to run those all behind. But look how much better that looks when it's smoked like that. Pretty neato, huh? Neato mosquito. You need me to step out of the shot so you can get a nice clean photo for the thumbnail?
There's too much reflection. I'm getting.
You have to tilt the camera forward or backward in order
I'm
to...
doing that. It's not helping.
How about now? Tell me when.
That's right. No, now I'm getting everything in the back. So, no. It's fine. No, that's too much reflection.
How about now?
Nope.
Camera says it's perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can get your shot later.
Okay.
Let's see. Final comments, questions. Let's see if there's anything in here for us to address before we say goodbye for the day. David wants to know, since this is a creator/gaming build, how will the performance be with no GPU, like for photo and video editing? Well, because there's numerous levels of photo and video editing involving 4K, 8K, 30-minute videos, 30-second videos, 3-hour videos, videos with lots of transitions, overlays. I mean, there's just no way for anybody to tell you which software you're using, which version of which software based on which way you're using it, that it's going to perform one way or another. That is something only you can decide. But for you to consider, there's no CPU above this. As far as like a consumer CPU, there's the KS. But if this isn't good enough for you, then you'll need to buy a discrete GPU for your particular individual needs. On the other hand, for me, doing my video editing with 3-hour videos in 1080, and then I can turn around and render them in 4K, I get superior video rendering speeds out of an Intel GPU than I do from NVIDIA or AMD. That's with CyberLink Power Director. I think anybody that uses most video editing will tell you the internal GPUs are far superior than most discrete GPUs, and those discrete GPUs are a waste of money for that purpose. But we're also talking about home creators versus professional creators, in which case the parameters change and therefore then the answers change. All I can tell you is, for most home non-professional users, this is more than what you need. For regular professional users, I don't know, because there's just too many variables in software, in how they're using the software, that can make that determination of one size fits all. For creators in general, it is at the very least a great foundation. The only thing that changes is the graphics card you add to it. So if you want this to be the best gaming PC that you can buy, then just put the best graphics card you can put in there. There's no limitation. There won't be any bottleneck. There won't be any power restriction. There won't be any space considerations in the case. Any GPU on the market sold to consumers will be powered by this power supply, and it will fit in this case, and that will work up to the limit of that GPU. Our CPU and other components will not be holding it back. That's about the best I can tell you. So that's why it's labeled as it is, because there is no one definition for what video editing and photo editing are and what makes it better or worse. There's just too many variables. For me, it's overkill. So some questions are a little more complicated to answer than they are to ask. A lot of things with computers are simply not black and white. There's too much individuality and personal preference. It's like ordering off a menu. What you like, I might despise, and what I order off the menu, you might think is disgusting. It's personal preference. What fills me up versus what fills you up kind of depends on how hungry we are. There's no one answer what's going to fill me up. Only you can tell me that. Looking to see if I've missed any other questions here. John Paul Bacon said he's got the option of the fans on or off only when necessary, or on all the time. Yeah, this power supply is interesting in that it doesn't have that switch. It just sets it that way whether you like it or not. It's going to turn off when it's not needed. I don't think there's any reason to override that, so I'm fine with the switch not being there. It's one less potential point of failure as far as I'm concerned. Jean Guy wants to know, why did we put the fans on this direction? Well, there's no way to put the fans on the other side because we'd be hitting the back of the case. So if you look at the back of the case, you'll see we're right up against, we're flush against where this would go. Anything that would jut out wouldn't allow the panel to go on. More importantly, you have to consider only one side of the fan displays the RGB. The other side is virtually invisible. That's why when I turn the case around, you don't really see the RGB, do you? You can kind of see it, but not really. Only the front side of the fan will display the RGB. That's universal. And so if we're going for that look, then the question is, do you believe that there's a superiority in pulling the air versus pushing the air? And if so, prove it. I've never seen anybody able to prove that. Anytime there's been a temperature difference, it's been a margin of error for the temperature of the room changing as they run their tests. You'd have to be in a controlled environment where the temperature of the room never changes. You'd have to have a thermometer or an accurate temperature reading, not just how it feels, right? You have to say the temperature of the room is absolutely solid. There's no room in existence that I'm aware of in any house or building that isn't completely sealed off specifically for this test. That would be required to get an accurate reading. If you're getting 1 to 3 degrees Celsius difference, that's margin of error, and it's affecting your room temperature. As such, you should put your fans on whatever way is your personal preference. There is no scientifically factual, objective, this is the only way. And if 3 degrees Celsius, even if that were a thing, makes that big of a difference, we're not having any heat problems. The hottest we got was 80. And one thing I will tell you that I hope you're self-aware of is how ridiculous these concerns are, that you're worried about something that isn't a problem and you're trying to fix something that isn't broken, and you're prioritizing facts over practicality. You're even if a 3 degree difference, even if that were a thing, which it isn't, but even if it were, you'd be willing to give up your RGB just to get 3 more degrees cooler when it's not going to run any different. If we're running at a max temp of 80 or a max temp of 83 or 77, the system doesn't run any different. It's all within the engineering specs. So getting caught up over tech minutia that has no practical difference in real life is an anxiety and a concern that, in my opinion, you would be better off using that same brain power and energy to think about stuff that actually matters. But that's my opinion. It does not flow with what enthusiasts teach. Enthusiasts care about impractical things quite often that in the real tech world do not exist. If you ever work for a company, and I don't know how many of you go to work, but you probably sit at a computer at work. And it doesn't matter what you like about Windows 10 or 11. And it doesn't matter if you like RGB or which direction the fans are on, because it's not your equipment and your employer is providing you that equipment to use. It doesn't matter if you don't like the operating system. It doesn't matter if you think the system could be running cooler. That's not what you're paid for unless you're in IT. So the reality of the situation is there are pointless exercises exhibited daily on YouTube through enthusiasts that have no practical place in reality with regards to how businesses run hundreds and thousands of computers reliably within a budget so that they can help their customers perform industry work that keeps all of our lights on and keeps us going to the grocery store and getting food so we're not out hunting our food. All of this is because of companies, because of the infrastructure that we have. And to presume that you're going to out-budget these companies and outperform these companies simply because you want to see higher benchmark numbers, it is the very essence of an enthusiast. And that's not wrong, it's just not practical. A lot of things that people do for hobbies don't really serve any practical purpose other than their entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not what happens in the real world. So if you work in corporate America, you likely are provided a computer by the company. And your personal opinion about the operating system or the cooling or the configuration is not your job and none of your business. And if you don't like it, you can quit. That's the real world. That's the world I live in when I do real work that really matters to a company being able to stay in business, to me being able to stay in business, for them to continue to pay their employees, for me to continue to pay my bills. We rely on each other. But an enthusiast, it's a very selfish thing. It's just, this is about me and my personal wants and needs and how much money I've got and how much time I've got. And that's fine. But that's not what I do. I'm trying to empower everybody, regardless of your reason why you're here. But I am battling with every fiber of my being the enthusiast community who want to insist on caring about things that don't matter because they're being led to believe it does. And when I say they don't matter, I mean in practicality. They matter in your head, but in reality, they don't actually matter. So when we encounter an actual problem, we'll fix it, right? When we encounter something that requires adjustment, we'll adjust it. We don't adjust it ahead of time, spending money and time we don't need to spend because we're afraid we're going to have a problem we never would have had. It's just not how business works. And I love what I do. I love making a big difference in the world. I love knowing that I'm the guy who can come in and a company, their phones are down, their internet goes down, everything's down, their customers can't get help, their employees are still getting paid, but aren't doing any work because they can't. And they need me there. They need this up. They're losing money. They're losing customers. If they wait too long, the customer will go somewhere else. That's pressure. And you get in there and you become the hero. You get them up and running, back in business. The whole train starts moving again. And you're the guy who did it. And then they pay you for that. And they say, thank you. You're a lifesaver. Then there's the enthusiast who goes, how can I get this 10 degrees cooler? Yeah, I don't care. You know, have fun. Enjoy yourself. But that doesn't really matter to me because it's only, imagine it's like a goal you've set for no particular reason. You saw somebody else do it. It doesn't make any difference to the world around you. It's just your own personal needs. And I'm trying to help the community, not just one individual. Not that I don't help single individuals, but my strongest motivation, my core, is the community. And then within that community, there are individuals, but that's like branches off the tree. The trunk of that tree that's rooted into the ground is based in practicality and community. You're not watching an enthusiast channel. There's enough of those. I don't need to add to that mess. They're fine. They're fun. It's great. Don't get me wrong. But if you really want to get serious about technical work, here's your place. I'll show you what to expect so you're properly prepared if this is a career you want to enter, and along with accountability, budgeting, marketing, and working effectively so that at the end of the day, you're making money and it's not costing you money. I wish there were more channels like this. There's a few out there. Live Windows Training with Doug Betts, Salem Techsperts, Mike's Unboxing, Reviews, and How-To. Real working techs opening up the doors to show you what's going on inside versus somebody who's never worked in the industry, never fixed a computer for money professionally, who just enjoys their hobby and they want to share your hobby with you. You may share their hobby too. And you care about things hobbyists care about. But the industry, you care about things the industry tells you you're going to care about. There's a difference. It's a big difference. And neither one is superior to the other one. Just one feeds me and one takes food from me. As a hobbyist, when I'm building overkill systems just because, it's costing me way more than I need to spend. And my sickness is I can justify it because I can make a video out of it. But I'm still going to limit, because of the scale of operations that I have, just how in depth I'm going to go to how much detail. Because you can't sit on one system too long. You have to keep moving or you're going to go broke. Your customers are going to get tired of waiting, or you're going to be too expensive, or you're too slow, whatever it is. So there's a certain amount where I can go a little overkill, but you know, there's no $7,000 cases and ridiculous open custom loop. I'm not a plumber, I'm not doing it. So, but that doesn't mean anybody who does is wrong. I don't share that enthusiasm. That's not fun for me. And you know what it is? When the companies call and that pressure is on, we're down. Our phones don't work. Nothing's working. We need you here now. I love that. I love being needed. I love to know that I serve a purpose that is, I have the trust of my customers knowing I'm going to be out there and I'm going to fix this. I love knowing that every second longer it takes me is costing them money. And so when I get it done, I feel so much better. They're always excited. They're never upset they have to go back to work. That's what's earning them money. That's what's earning me money. So I equally love that. And that is the trunk of the tree. That is my main core. And in all of this, sharing this information with you is to give you a window into what that world is like, with a little bit of extravagance thrown in here and there, but within reason, what I consider to be reason anyway. So, yeah. If we're going to put RGB fans in and we're going to orient them where we can't see them, that was a stupid waste of money, in my opinion. If I'm putting RGB fans on, I want to see them. And if my cooler runs a little bit hotter, it won't make any difference in the world. But that's me. Mouse Hunter says hello. There's Matt Zoloff. Says something. He's talking to Mara, I guess. Oh, that Matt Zoloff has 2 accounts. Bill B says he's building 2 PCs, one for gaming using 9800X3D. Wow, you found one for sale. Just wait a couple weeks when that 9850X3D comes out. Oh, I should have waited. It's a good chip. Nothing wrong with it. There's better chips coming just a couple weeks away. Struggling deciding a 9800X3D, which is better in creative, or the new Intel Ultra 9 285K. I don't know where you're finding these chips to buy them. As far as I can tell, there is no 9800X3Ds to buy, and there are no Ultra 9 285Ks to buy. Do you have a link where either of these chips is available for sale? I don't know how you're buying something that's not available for sale. And if you know something I don't, I'd like that information very much, please. Thank you. Luke Greenia says, I might be silly, but I'm still more than ecstatic with the Project Zero build. Well, that's a combination of practical and elegance. You don't have to pick one or the other, but it's also more expensive. So Project Zero build is a beautiful computer and a highly capable computer. Well, it is also reliable and secure. We can reach all 4 of these goals, but we have to open our wallets to make that happen. Sometimes people reach out so far beyond goals that if your system boots in 1 second or your system boots in half a second, and I'm just using this as an extreme example, who cares? What human being notices a half second? But there are people that will spend hundreds to get that little teeny tiny diminishing return. They'll spend this much and in return get that much. And then there are people that'll spend that much and they expect this much, and they're unreasonable. It's never going to happen. So we are in an industry where you get what you pay for, and if that matters to you, which it doesn't matter to everybody, that you want both performance and the looks, people tend to want one or the other. I've seen a lot of gaming systems sold that are nothing more than RGB older computers that are sold for $300 or less, and they're totally happy with them. Look at all the lights. I've also seen gaming computers sold for $6,000 and the person says it's not good enough. Some people you'll never please. But in the middle, there's the practical side, which is this is a reasonable amount of performance, reliability, and aesthetics for this price. And at some point when it's too low, you're being unreasonable, and when it's too high, the price is too high, any expectations above high is unreasonable. You're impossible to please at that point because you may want things that don't yet exist. So I do like to prefer to have happy customers, and the way that happens is you meet their expectations. And I like to know that before we even begin a transaction. So what are you expecting? What are you expecting it to cost? How long are you expecting it to take? And as long as we can all agree on reasonable answers to those questions, then we agree, I agree, and they agree that I will begin the work, when it will start, when it will end, and what it will cost. Barring things going sideways, customers should be happy otherwise. The only reason the customer shouldn't be happy is I did not fulfill my promise. I overpromised and underdelivered. I said something that was a lie. I'll have it done in 3 days, and 6 days later it's not done. Customer's probably going to be pissed off. That $100 job, well, now it's done, it's $250. Well, what do you mean? You told me it's $100. Customer's going to be pissed off. Well, I'm the one who set those expectations. So if those expectations aren't met, I'm the one to blame. That's the business owner or the business. That's their job. On the other hand, if a customer's unreasonable, I'd rather find out now before we interact with any transaction. Say, oh, not a good fit. You won't be happy with me. And I won't be happy if you're not happy, and this whole thing, we shouldn't even go down the path. Most business owners don't do that. They just go, give me some money. I'll tell you whatever you want to hear. Just give me some money. Vast majority of businesses, in my experience, don't give a rat's behind. Just give me your money. Once I've got it, It's mine now. That's priority one. I don't run my business that way, and I'm also not Geek Squad, right? There's a reason why my business hasn't grown beyond me. I won't allow it to. Bill says he got a 9800 X3D from B&H Photo 2 weeks ago. So here's the thing. I am on the email list at B&H Photo specifically to alert me when the 9800 X3D is in stock. And I've been on that list now for 4 weeks. Nothing. But that's how I got my Ultra 9, was I put myself on the wait list at B&H Photo. You put your email address in, they'll let you know when it's in stock. And if you get that email right when it comes in, you know, it's first come, first serve. So if you get the email too late, it might already sell out again. They're not holding it for anybody. That's how I got the Ultra 9. I've never seen the Ultra 9 available at Newegg or Amazon at retail price. Maybe for $200 more, but not at what it should be selling for. And the 9800 X3D is more or less the same thing. I'm not going to pay $800 for that. You're out of your mind. So I'm surprised you got one, and I'm surprised that you were able to buy it within the period of time I should have at least gotten an email. I was never offered an opportunity to buy it. But he says the Intel Ultra 9 he doesn't have. He's planning and trying to decide on the Intel or another 9800. The mixed creative gaming is for me. The 9800 X3D is only for gaming. I don't really think you could make a bad decision here. I think you'd be happy with either chip, to be honest. In many ways, the 9800 X3D is superior, especially when we're talking about gaming. It's just got a better graphics card. If you're not adding a graphic, if you're going to use that chip with the integrated graphics, you can't really do any better than that right now. But in about 2 weeks, you're going to hear about 2 more chips from AMD, 2 more X3D chips that were going to make this 9800 X3D not seem so appealing anymore. Remember I said that. Right around the corner is the Consumer Electronics Show. It happens usually around the first week of January. I don't like going to them. They're very crowded, and it's all saturated with the media. I'm not going to report anything somebody else hasn't already reported on. So what's the point? It's crowded, it's expensive. 2 things I don't like. But enough people are doing it. Keep your eyes open for the new product announcements that'll be coming out of AMD, NVIDIA, 50 series graphics cards, new chips from AMD right around the corner. It's possible they may announce them just prior to CES, or they might hold back and wait to make CES more exciting for them, so they get talked about in the press more. There's a lot of competition to spread out among the press. What do you do to step up and shine to get the free advertising of the press? That's why companies will often hold back. That being said, it's just a little early to be making that decision. I would say if you get an Ultra 9, use an Ultra 9, and if you get a 9800 X3D, whatever one you can get first, if there's a time period on this. Otherwise, if there's no time crunch, I'd wait. Because when the other chips from AMD come out that are better than the 9800 X3D, the demand for the 9800 X3D will drop, and so will its price. This industry moves fast. Just takes a couple weeks and it'll all change. So just a heads up. But either way, I don't think you'll make a bad decision. I think you'll be happy with either chip. Bill says he's heard about the new AMD chips that are coming. He's curious how they will perform on creative work. It depends on the creative work and how you use it and what software you're using. You'll have to determine that you're on your own. But let us know what you think. I don't think there's a really big difference other than gaming on the productivity side of it. And if there is a difference, it's probably not noticeable by a normal human being. It's usually noticed only in synthetic benchmarks that don't simulate reality. But maybe that's your basis of comparison, or maybe it's actual work. But you have to tell us. We can't tell you that. The difference between the chips and productivity work is so minor as to be insignificant. As far as my attitude is, they're basically the same. Yes, you might see a little higher numbers in some benchmarks, but the question is, when you sit down to use it, does it feel any faster to you? Does it feel any slower to you? And compared to what? Based on your experience, you can come back and let us know and share with us what you feel. We'd very much like to hear that, but we can't predict your feelings. Hey, there's Mitch Morrison joining us, says hello. Just joining us here right at the tail end. Bill mentions particular applications like Adobe. Again, it doesn't mean anything to me. You might use Word to make notes, or you might use Word to write a novel, or you might use Word to make a 10,000 page document. These are all very different use case scenarios, and you might use a lot of different fonts and add a lot of pictures, and the size of your document and resources of your document, even though it's all Microsoft Word, will result in one system performing more admirably in your demands and your use case than it does for somebody else with the exact same system using it in a different way than you're using it. That's all I'm trying to get across. So the applications you use is not important, it's how you use them. And through your expectations of how you expect them to perform, how do you explain that to me? You can't. You just have to use it and let us know what your experience is. You can speculate about it all day, and you can hear what you want to hear. That's fine. You can keep asking people until you get the answers you want. But the bottom line is it will not change your experience. And that's the only thing I'm interested in, is now that you've done it, when you've done it, what are your thoughts now from your unique perspective that only represents you and your needs? I'm still interested because there will be a consensus among people, and I'm interested overall in the consensus. You know, most people agree there's this, or most people agree there's that. But the individual use of how each people use their machines is rarely identical. What else? I don't see any other questions, so I think we'll wrap it up. So again, we've had some long shows these last few days, but you know, it's a lot of work to catch up on, and I'm trying to be as thorough as I can, and certainly appreciate the feedback and the thoughts, especially having me rotate that cooler around. David Graham, good catch. And I got some cable management, pretty minor stuff ahead of me. I've got to activate Windows, stuff like that. When I activate Windows, you know I'm going to SCD keys. I'm going to buy a Windows 10 Pro key because it's a few dollars cheaper. And I'm going to enter that the same as I would a Windows 11 Pro key, and it activates and stays tied to the motherboard forever. When you buy a new motherboard, you need to buy a new key. Other than that, it should stay tied to the system, even on a reinstall. You can just don't enter the key. Once you connect to the internet, it should put the key right back in again. If that doesn't work, it's likely because someone stole your key or you used it on a second system, and now the second system, which shouldn't have activated, took it from the main system, and you just weren't aware of that until you needed to reinstall. But they're all guaranteed to work, you know, one license, one system, just like a license plate on a car. And if you guys ever run into any issues or concerns, I'm always here for you. Anything I'm endorsing, Acronis, RoboForm, or SCD keys, we stand behind them 100%. I'm not aware of any other YouTube creator that does that unless they're making the products. You know, if I'm selling you a backpack, I suppose it would really be important for me to support it, right? But I don't make Acronis, I don't make RoboForm. I use them in my real business. Same with SCD keys. So they have to meet all the legal and liability requirements my business requires. And I want you to buy from the same places I'm buying for the same reasons I do this for my customers. I offer it to you guys at a discount. Well, it's not me, it's them. Acronis is discounted, RoboForm's discounted, SCD keys is discounted. You can buy these things other places and pay more without the peace of mind. But if you want the peace of mind and you want to pay less, the links are in the description below. I'll leave it to you to make whatever decision is right for you. And of course, we can't thank Acronis, RoboForm, and SCD keys enough for their support of our community and the community itself. So thank you guys so much for making this channel what it is and what it will be. Without you, well, I'd have very little reason to make these videos. And with your generosity, with your memberships, super chats, and gift cards, we're able to buy equipment free from manufacturers' influence and be honest about our experience and use what parts we genuinely want to use, not what they sent us for free. Right? Oh, we'll send you this to review it. I don't want that, but it's free. Okay, I guess I'll review it. Anything you see me reviewing, well, sometimes like companies like Minis Forum will send us units for free. It's only because I wanted to review it anyway, and under no restriction, I'm free to do it live and say what I want. The company doesn't tell me what I'm allowed to say, what I'm not allowed to say. Many companies insist they have to see the video before I show it to you. And we won't work with those companies. We'll just buy their product if we want to review it, and we just bypass them and do it any way we want because it's ours. That's possible because of you. So we can't thank you enough for that. Speaking of which, Paul Gray with a $10 Australian. Paul's been very generous. Our friend Buster, of course. Oystein, Frankie B. These guys rock. They're so generous so frequently. I can't shout them out and say thank you enough. But also not to disparage those who are giving anything at all as infrequently, right? Because it's still more than most. Most viewers watch these videos, don't give and won't ever give us a penny. That's fine, they don't have to. But if we get 4,000 views on this video this week, you can rest assured fewer than 200 people contributed to that. And that's okay. But just, I want the other 3,800 people to know it's because of you. They have the content to watch. And yeah, that's what's making this channel very different than most. That's going to wrap it up for me for today. Thanks to Mara, as always, for all the work she does in the background, our thumbnails, video descriptions, answering your questions and emails. If you want to email us, let me put that email address up real quick before we say goodbye, which is right here. And we'll be back live as we are every single Friday. We do our live Friday show at 1 o'clock. Almost all of our live shows are pretty much there at 1 o'clock Phoenix time. That currently means 12 o'clock Pacific time, 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. That'll wrap it up for me for today. I will see you all again, hopefully tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Until then, bye for now.